Well, funny seeing you here, especially since I've been adrift at sea for many months. And because, well, we're on a deserted desert island off the western coast of the main continent. A short while ago, I and my ex-fiance, God rest his soul, along with many others, were running something of a pirate operation, you could say, off the east coast. But the local British government put a stop to that. Since all of our comrades are dead, I guess it's about time that we officially abandon them all and our old base. I doubt that they've been tracking me on my little raft all these months, but no doubt it won't take very long at all before the British find out where we've went. Well, I suppose we'll just cross that bridge when we get to it. Besides, we have a lot of work to do if we're gonna shape up this island into our new base of operations. There is already one big issue with our new island that we've chosen to build our pirate bay and our pirate fortress on, and that's the fact that there's not a lot of wood. More than enough to go about building a proper campfire to cook our meals on like the fish we plan on catching, but a nice pirate caravel to raid the shores? Not so much. Not only does our new island lack any type of tree or cacti for the most part, but it also lacks vegetation in general. We have some agave fruit, but we're going to need to start growing our own food if we plan on surviving here long term, and not only surviving, but thriving. For our first crop, we decided to go with some nice, sturdy onions. Much of the local wildlife wasn't all that entertained by our presence, such as this coyote, which decided to try to hunt us for food. A big mistake on its part. The poor, starved canine came looking for a quick and easy meal, but on the contrary, it would end up being my very first meal in my new home. Ah, we do love a good ironic twist, don't we, lads and lasses? We finished scarfing down some of this delicious dog supper before we were fast asleep, nice and warm on the sand next to the fire, as the salty ocean waves and breeze were coming in and out of the shore, helping us drift off to sleep. You know, this place may be barely hospitable for vegetation and other types of organic life, but I think we're really going to like it here. Besides, the rough conditions of the island should also mean that we don't get too many wandering travelers and what have you with prying eyes. And if we do end up having some wandering traders or travelers or adventurers even, we could just say that we're an onion tycoon, an entrepreneur of sorts, setting up a nice big onion farm on the island to sell to the masses. Speaking of which, we also ended up creating a very small little growing zone of cotton. That way we can harvest a pretty decent size yield of cloth. The reason for this is because any and all ships that are wind powered, and given the time period right now, that's all of them, they are going to need sails, and in turn sails are made of cloth. I think you get the point. However, to get ahead in this world, the number one factor that everyone needs is money. Silver, right? And I think that we're going to make some right now with a bit of honest work. No pirating, no plundering and looting. We are actually going to be taking on a bounty target. Yes, indeed, within the confines of the law, there is a way to go out and kill, and sometimes not kill, like in this case, folks for a bit of silver. It is kind of hypocritical of me and ironic because we have been the ire of several a bounty hunter in our past as well, being a bandit and a pirate, and yeah, you'll learn more about me as we go, I'm sure, but this time it is us doing the hunting. Whoa, ahoy there, sailor. Not to interrupt your viewing experience, but I just wanted to let you know that you can find every episode of series just like the one in the supercut that you're watching right now on Patreon a few days early, at the least, after you subscribe to the Rat Specialist tier, if you're interested. Alright, I'll leave you alone now. Thanks. We arrived at the small tribal outpost, and it appears that our target only has one guard with him. This shouldn't be too hard, but there is only one of me. We'll need to be extremely cautious and diligent as I slowly pulled my raft up to the dock, latching it on, creeping through the night, rifle in hand. Creeping up to the side of one of these buildings, luckily for a silent attack I had a few throwing axes, but I wasn't very successful in this endeavor, and thus it would seem that I would need to let my rifle do the talking for me instead. The bounty target began to rush me, and I began smacking her over the head with the butt of my rifle several times until she collapsed. There was still her friend to deal with, but as she was attempting to crawl away, I snatched her up, still firing my rifle at her companion. These bitches don't know that they're messing with the baddest around. Even shooting my rifle with one hand, I could easily take out some pathetic tribal impet throwing rocks at me, to which I did. Now then, time to tend to those wounds, stuffing them with sand and, I guess, rocks. I'm not sure what else I could put in those to stop the bleeding, but I can't have you dying on me before we get back to the mainland. I am feeling exhausted though, so since you're injured and can't move anyways, maybe I take a quick snooze. Whoa, Nelly, not so fast, little lady. Looks like that little power nap did me some good, and luckily I caught my target right before she got away. It's time for us to head out and to get our money. Thankfully, she was a citizen and also wanted by a nearby tribal government, and it wasn't too far away from our little Onion Island fortress that we're building, so we could easily fulfill the warrant, get our reward money, and be on our way back home. However, I did also notice that there was a prison not too far away, and that there may be a possible prisoner willing to join us. So of course we sailed our winding way around the sandy shores of the continent until we arrived. Just off the beach we could see that it appeared this was a British camp, and there were 2 British soldiers guarding it. Although we're not exactly sure what this gentleman did, we do know that any enemy of the British is a friend of ours. We would mosey on up to the shoreline and then jump out of our little canoe here, but it would seem that they were already on guard and awaiting our arrival. Perhaps they spotted us in the distance. Either way, a bit of a gunfight would break out with myself and the first guard, at which point I would light him on fire and end up killing him. The second bloke was attempting to escape, and though I had shot him in the arm, I would end up letting him go. Perhaps he'll end up bleeding to death in the forest as he runs away. Nevertheless, I wanted to grab a few smoke leaf blunts as well as this other guard's rifle, as I find these to be quite useful. Now then, time to claim our new pirate crew member. We offered our help to him in exchange that he would end up joining us. Funny enough, he was more than ecstatic to do so. And you know what? I think he'll make much better use of this musket than that charred corpse lying on the ground over there. Now then, it's time for us to show our new compadre his new home. So we would set sail, and for about 2 to 3 days, we would travel there, and eventually we would finally make it back home. And just as quickly as we docked at the shore, our new friend Martin suggested that we give this settlement a proper name. And I think that he's right, so we ended up calling it Fortifying Fortress. Now this may seem a little bit odd, except for those of you with a keen eye who probably realize that it is named after the name of the island, Fortifying Rock. Yes, unfortunately I'm afraid I'm not all that creative, but it is an effective name, you could say. One of the best parts, one of the pros instead of all the cons of sailing for so long, I should say, is by the time that we got back, most of our plants were finally fully grown and ready for harvest, which means that we have plenty of cloth and onions. Now, one of the first things that we ended up using this cloth for was some proper tents. And of course, you know, we want to go about building some sails and stuff so that we can build some proper ships. But if we get killed in our sleep by wild coyotes because we're out in the open, that'll never happen. Speaking of which, though, we would go around and cut down several cacti until we had plenty of wood, and then we would actually begin mining some nearby steel ore veins as well as some compacted machinery for components. All of these resources are going to accumulate in some sailing instruments, some ropes, and also some mast and sails and everything that you need for a ship, of course. And Yes, as I'm sure you've guessed by this point, it is finally time that we go about building our very first ship. Not only our first ship, but our very first pirate caravel. Now this particular type of ship is very important for us as it is loaded up with 3 cannons on each side. Now I'm sure some of you fine folks are probably pretty familiar with this type of ship and just how powerful they are and just what we can do with them, especially if you had watched the original video where I showed these off, or maybe the supercut, which you should check out after this, which just so happens to be something of a prelude into these characters and into this world that we're playing in. I probably should have mentioned that earlier. Now then, for the name of our ship, we are going to be naming it the Roaring Onion. Looking back, I kind of wish I would have named it the Blooming Onion, but whatever, this one's fine as well. This is a bit satirical since I made the little quip earlier about this being an onion farm, so I guess it works. We would also go ahead and give it a more fitting paint job given our environment here, and also to maybe kind of give it an onion color scheme, sort of. Now, as mentioned previously, we don't have a lot of wood or trees or cacti or anything like that on this island, so we are going to be using stone blocks for the majority of our construction projects, and so obviously we needed a stone cutting area to go about making these. We were also going to use the cloth that we currently have to make ourselves a storage tent for all of our onions. Now, of course, we could use our food storage barrels, but they would cost more resources and take up more time, so I felt that this was more fitting. We would also use the granite blocks that we had been cutting to make ourselves a covered pot. This pot will allow us to store our food inside like our meals without them deteriorating. And I'm going to level with you, we ended up growing a little bit too much in terms of our onions. We have a lot, so for the time being, we're going to start growing some other crops. In particular, some coffee plants, as I feel that the leaves, well, not only will we use them to make us some coffee, to make us faster and also feel a lot happier, but we can also sell those to make more money. We may be pirates, but I'd like to have some type of alias where we also make some money, maybe like a money laundering company or something. We'll see how it goes. We also ended up having a trade caravan, a Prussian trade caravan, which was all fine and dandy, and I was actually pretty excited to trade with him to make some money, but how the hell did they get to our island? And how the hell did they know we were here? That would explain how they got out here. Hard to say how they knew that we were here. Perhaps word has spread from our trading on the mainland and they are hearing about a large onion farm. I'm not sure, but we are going to be selling them quite a few items. And we would also end up purchasing a couple for ourselves. A more modernized pistol. Apparently this new invention is known as a revolver. No doubt this will come in very handy, and we also purchased a helmet for Martin, as I feel like it would be good for him to protect his noggin. Yeah, the Prussians were so kind that they even decided to leave us a gift, with it being a wool face mask and a pair of glasses. Our eyesight is fine, so I guess we'll end up selling those too. I do find it a little bit strange that the Prussians aren't exactly familiar with who we are, given our escapades on the east coast of the continent, but I suppose that there are more British forces and fortresses out that way anyhow. Nevertheless, we're tickled. We would, however, be a bit more tickled if we were to, I don't know, maybe take our pirate ship out and do a little bit of plundering. By God, we are pirates after all. It's about time that we acted like it. We had the perfect target, an Impid tribal settlement just a few miles north from our own island. It was the perfect target, of course, because the Impids are hostile with everyone, so nobody's gonna give a shit at all once we kill them all and take all their loot. Something that we've learned over countless years of pirating and banditing in these lands is it really pays to have allies in this world, and when you don't, well, you end up becoming an easy target. Now, just because these Impids don't have allies coming to their aid, that does not mean that they're going to be all that easy. This is an entire settlement of Impids. Now, of course, we have a plan, but they seem to have muskets, and even worse, one of them has a hand mortar. This could be treacherous. Easy target? Yes, but not exactly when you have one ship and two pirates. That is where things get a little bit more difficult. If we can manage to pull this off, it will be interesting, for sure. One of the biggest issues that makes this much harder than we were thinking it was going to be is the fact that they're not as close to the shoreline as we had hoped, meaning that we can't fire directly into their village with our cannons. Looks like we're going to have to try to draw them out on foot. Thankfully, we did have the element of darkness and surprise on our side as we crept up on the outskirts of their little village, firing our muskets inward at them, attacking many of their members. Eventually, they would come out to fight with us, and we had killed quite a few of them. We even decided to start burning down some of their homes. And finally, this seemed to be the tipping point that pissed them all off just enough that they would actually start chasing us. Poor foolish bastards, little did they know this would be their end. Although they almost stopped us when some of them chased us down, but we did manage to get back aboard our ship and open fire. I will say, initially, most of our cannon fire wasn't exactly yielding the best of results, but that is why we have 3 cannons on each side. That way, when we had a bit of a cooldown trying to reload one side, we would just kind of sail around to the other. But this is also only one caravel. Imagine what we can do once we have an entire fleet of ships under our command. The possibilities are endless. For example, using the one ship that we currently have, we have actually indeed managed to win this battle. Though yes, we took quite a bit of damage and it took a very long time and was incredibly difficult. In the end, this settlement was ours. Now it's time for us to finally begin checking out our new settlement that we've taken by blood and by force. And funny enough, they had, well, it wasn't a lot of silver, it was a teeny tiny bit, but they actually had quite a bit of gold, just right around or just under 130. I never would have guessed that a bunch of tribal impids would have had a fortune this vast, but we'll take it. Now, of course, we couldn't just leave this settlement intact. The impids may come back and rebuild and reform even larger, which would be very difficult for us to try and attack once more, and also because, well, our island doesn't have a lot of wood or the possibility for wood, so we began deconstructing all of their buildings here to take back home with us for possible ships and docks and anything and everything that required wood. Now, they also had a great big field of tobacco plants that were ripe for harvest, so of course we began cutting down those plants into their leaves. That way we could attempt to sell them. Now, I know I'm focusing a lot on stealing the impids' resources, but we did take many days to get here sailing, and also we worked very hard to take this settlement, so I think we deserve it. Speaking of making profits off the backs of others' labor, we decided to take all these tobacco leaves, some of the jade, and some of the tea leaves that we had harvested to a nearby mainland settlement to make a good bit of money. We would then finally return back home several days later with all of our bounty and loot and everything that we had plundered. I decided to give the hand mortar to Martin, as he is currently our right-hand man, and he's most likely going to stay that way, so he's the only other person I would trust with it. I mean, there's only 2 of us, but you know what I mean. And now that we finally have plenty of wood, so much wood that honestly we didn't really know what to do with it all, I think it's finally time for a proper construction project. A great big old massive dock that will be able to house our entire fleet of ships, and not only that, of course, it's going to be a much more convenient place for traders and other travelers looking to purchase maybe some coffee beans or onions or whatever else they want to trade with us to dock their own ships. However, docks are a tedious and time-consuming project, so we'll check back in on it later. I wanted to mention the fact in the meantime that we had an iguana self-tame while we were doing all all of our construction. So if you fine folks have a name for our little green pet, be sure to leave that in the comment section down below. A little bit of time later, and we also were able to harvest our very first yield of coffee beans. And we would actually end up starting to brew a little bit of these beans for ourselves into some delicious hot coffee. Nothing better than a good old cup of joe. Not only was it delicious, but it also gave us a +3 mood buff, which isn't much, but it's pretty good. And not only that, as you can see, it also will suppress our tiredness, meaning that we can work longer hours, which is going to be great for finishing up this big old dock. While Ms. is back at base working on that, we're also going to have Martin travel out in the ship to do some more trading with local tribal governments. We, personally, absolutely love our own onion stews and our hot cups of joe, and we thought that the rest of the mainland might enjoy it as well, and also pay us a handsome sum for it. After several days of sailing back and forth, we would finally return home, and as you can see, our dock is finally finished. It was time for us to unload the ship's cargo, which was mostly our food, but also a good bit of silver that we had made off our trading. We also ended up getting a new weapon, some fire bombs. Since Ms. is an impid, it seemed more fitting to let Martin have these as well, and this way both of them shouldn't have much of an issue burning down any of the villages that we pillage. You can think of these as a ye old pirate grenade, if you will. We had also purchased a book. Right now we only have the one, but at some point we would like to have a grand library filled with many a tale of fiction and also maybe even real life. And best of all, Martin's favorite, we also purchased some double-aged Scotch whiskey. You know, just to celebrate and commemorate all of our accomplishments thus far. But a pirate's work is never done. It's time for us to start improving our camps with some little logs by our tents to keep them fueled throughout the night and keep us warm, of course, when things get a bit cool and chilly out, as well as some camp lodgings. This is kind of the same as having a bed with a dresser and an end table. It just increases their mood. We were also beginning to have some storage issues, and so far we have completely filled up our storage tents with all of our onions that we've been eating on, so we started digging a few pits, and the reason for this is because we're going to put all of our coffee beans, our money, and other items down in there to keep them safe and also keep them from deteriorating and being eaten by wild animals and, you know, that kind of thing. We would also end up building ourselves a tailoring bench. Now, since we've been growing all the cotton, we have a good bit of cloth still in storage, and I felt that it would probably be appropriate for us to start making ourselves some proper pirating clothes, starting off with Ms. herself, our pirate captain, giving her a proper black bicorn hat that matches her current attire and also is very reminiscent of the last captain we had, who just so happened to be her fiancé, as he wore one as well, almost as if in his honor. We also would make her a monocle to express and accentuate the fact that we are not just any ordinary pirates. I'm not quite sure what to call us. Maybe we become some type of mercenary pirates, but we're also focused on making a vast fortune in other ways as well. With such a large camp that we are building here, we also need some proper defenses, and for now we're going to be sticking with some very simple ones, with those being wooden barricades. Currently, we haven't really experienced any issues with enemies attacking us here on the island, as they would have to sail from the mainland, so I don't think initially we're really going to have any trouble, but eventually trouble will find us. And with that, I also want to just spruce up the camp a little bit here by building some proper street lamps that are going to light our way day or night, and also we're going to be building some proper granite streets. Eventually, I want to turn this into a booming pirate city, a true capital for us here. But for now, this is pretty decent, I suppose. And finally, the cherry on top of it all is going to be a proper flagpole right in the center of our camp, flying our beautiful skull and bones, towering above us all with prominence and power. And with that, my friends, I feel that we have achieved enough for one episode, being the first episode to really get us started. I want to ask you if you could, and I try not to ask this too much because I know it's annoying, but please like, like and subscribe and all that great stuff, as it really does help out the algorithm, and especially on these episode 1 of the series videos, I always want to try to boost them as much as possible, so if you can, I would really appreciate it, and I love you, thank you. But only time shall tell, my friends. Will we build a pirate empire, a pirate mercenary company empire, I suppose, that will stand the test of time and possibly even have a naval power that will be able to match that of the British Empire? I suppose we'll have to find out. See you later. Well, welcome back, my friends, to our little onion island here, where we are going to be doing plenty of looting, pillaging, pirating, and, well, that's about it. Let's get started. Today, the first thing I want to do is to work on some proper clothing, pirate clothing, that is for Martin. If he's going to be our right-hand man, he needs to look the part at the very least. Speaking of which, we've got him harvesting up plenty of our dyes, not only so that we can go ahead and sell them, but that way we can dye the new apparel that we're creating. I actually lied a moment ago. I was going to make something for Martin, but I decided to make something for Ms. A proper coat for the captain of this little pirate outfit. However, this still goes hand in hand with giving Martin a proper outfit, as he can always have Mrs. Old Soldier coat. Take care of it, old boy. It's done me well for quite some time. Now, not only are we looking better, but we're feeling better too. So we're going to take some time, harvest up the rest of these dyes, and get them loaded up onto the ship, along with plenty of cloth and other textiles that we have to do a bit of trading. No doubt the tribal villages up and down the main coast would love to purchase some of these dyes and textiles for their fine folks. Although this journey is going to take a while, so we'll check back in on Martin in a little bit. Back home we had something of a trade request, although I guess it was more like pet sitting. Apparently one of the high-ranking generals in the French military wants us to babysit their pet duck named Buffy for just over a RimWorld month, and in exchange they would give us a masterwork rifle and a masterwork pistol, so obviously we accepted. He had a couple of his finest soldiers drop the duck off a little bit later, and I guess we're ready to pet sit. We even have a nice little place for the little ducky to sleep at night, and I guess we'll have to keep it from getting ate by coyotes, but it should be fine. Finally, Martin had arrived at a nearby tribal settlement, the same one we've been trading with for a while, and I suppose it's time for us to take a walk through their fine city streets and park our ship at their dock, of course. Perhaps we'll take a look around and see if they have some sort of tribal tavern even, maybe meet some nice friends. Not to worry though, we wouldn't get too drunk to forget our real mission of trading off all this dye and cloth, which we would quickly do before heading all the way back home. But as Martin continues to sail around the sandy coast of our little comfy home isle here, back home, we ended up having a British invasion. Approximately 2 soldiers coming from the northwest. They're not stopping to plan their attack, so that tells me they've planned it preemptively. We are outnumbered here, so we'll have to be sure to use our tactics and our big brain. Tactic 1 was to burn one of them alive, searing his flesh and causing him to run around in a panic before we shot him in the back of the head with our revolver. This would also send his comrade into a panic, trying to take cover in some nearby rubble. Luckily, this gentleman only had 2 flintlock pistols, meaning that his range is nothing compared to our own. And it was also because of this we would easily be able to push up on him, shooting him right between the eyes. God, it feels good to be a winner. You wouldn't know there, would you, Gingerbeard? Well, now that we've killed the British soldiers trying to kill us, only one question remains. Where in the hell did these fellas come from? I would expect a much larger raid if they had some ships docked somewhere nearby. And I got my answer pretty quickly. It would appear that they've set up some type of outpost on our sandy island here. Now, I don't think that this is for us. It's most likely some type of farming effort, though I doubt that as well, as there's not a lot of farmland, so it could only be for a military perspective, I suppose. Perhaps trying to put a foothold in these waters on this side of the continent. But if these were scouts and they're looking for new territory on the island, island, we are bound to find a very large warband at some point. I felt a bit safer though once Martin finally returned from his trading mission. Although he only had about 511 silver, at the very least we have our caravel here once more in case we need it. Now that we have both of our pirates here and our manpower is back up to par, at least more than what it would be if it were just Miz, I suppose, we are going to begin deconstructing many a rune in the area, not only for the wax and also some of the urns that will beautify our place here, but also of course for the stone blocks. Not only that, but we are also going to be cutting many of our own stone blocks for a very long period of time and building up a large stockpile. This might seem like stupid stuff to be mentioning, but the reason is because we want to use these resources to fortify our island and truly turn it into a fortress at some point. But as you well know, we can't resist a good trade mission, and since we have so many coffee beans, and I do mean so many, we are going to be sending Martin out once more in the caravel to trade up and down the main coast with every single tribal settlement that he can find that's willing to buy some coffee. In his absence, Miz would be doing many of the deconstruction projects all on her own. Not only that, but she would also be completely reorganizing and reshaping our camps here at the island. All of this, of course, going hand in hand with our plan to completely revamp the island into a proper fortification. This was not an easy task to be doing solo. I can't wait until we end up getting a couple more pirates at the very least. Martin was finally selling off his coffee beans to nearby tribes, making a pretty penny off of those. After trading with one such tribe as he was sailing back north, we actually would end up encountering a logging camp controlled by some impid tribes. Naturally, we decided to investigate, you could say. It seems to be quite a small little camp with only about 2 to 3 impid tribes people defending it. I doubt that they would be able to stop us from coming in and destroying the entire place and taking the fruit of their labor. Well then, ladies and gentlemen, here goes nothing. Those poor dumb saps. I almost felt bad for them after unleashing barrage after barrage of cannon fire upon their little home here. By the time that I was finished, there was hardly anything left except for some rubble, some burning structures, and some cowardly impids running away. Probably for the best, I'd say. With your comrades dead and no place for you to hide, our cannons would completely decimate you, and if they didn't, our hand mortar definitely would. Now then, with yet another encampment plundered, it was time for us to begin pillaging and collecting all of our loot. In this case, plenty of wood, which was great as we didn't have a lot back at the island, but we only had enough cargo space for a mere fraction of it. We need more ships. Of course, though, this wood is going to help us out a lot with building new ships, so once we finally get that back home, that's something that we'll look into doing, of course. Meanwhile, back home, Miz was already planning out and beginning to construct our very first fortified structure. This is going to be, well, to be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure what we could call it. I do know that it is going to be Miz's house in her personal quarters, but it also seems like something akin to the ancestral spire that we're building in our tribal warfare series currently going on. So essentially somewhere where our Captain Miz is going to be living, but we may also, of course, conduct official pirate business here, such as meetings and things like that, and festivals, and yada yada yada. So all that to say, if you have a name for this fortified structure, this center point for the town, be sure to let me know in the comment section down below. Anywho though, as we were constructing this new building, we ended up having a tribal slave caravan approaching. Though we find the practice of slavery completely abhorrent, we were up to buying someone their freedom. In this case, a lady by the name of Brown. Say goodbye to a life of chains and bondage, and hello to a life full of loot and plunder. Of course though, we would need her to also look the part, something dark and mysterious that would put the fear of the pirates into the hearts of our enemies. Now, Brown wasn't very good at construction, but that's completely fine as she can take over other duties like cooking and cleaning and hauling and things like that as Miz finally finishes up this structure. It had already been about a month or so, and Buffy the Duck was ready to go back to her French lord, and they would even make good on their promise to supply us with 2 masterwork weapons. Now, do the French know that we may eventually use these weapons to maybe pillage some of their towns and villages? No. Would they care? Yes. Are we going to tell them? No. With that though, we finally built our structure, our Great Hall, whatever we plan on calling it, and as you can see in the center of the building, we do have an upstairs portion that is primarily going to be the sleeping and living quarters of Captain Miz. I went ahead and built her one of the most comfortable double beds that we possibly could, and it is a double bed just in case maybe she ends up having a gentleman caller over. You'll also notice she has a bookshelf stocked up with plenty of tales of woe and fantasy adventures, I'm sure, and other things to entertain her. We're also going to be moving all of our food production, our dining area, and things like that inside as well. That way we don't have the rain pouring on our head as we're eating our meals now, and we can be much more comfortable in a beautiful place. And just like that, our trading troubadour had finally returned home with a big old cargo full of loot and also many other things that we had purchased, and also some of the silver, of course, that we acquired from our trade. Specifically, we had purchased a new type of revolver, something of a navy revolver, I believe it is, somewhat fitting given a pirate's life, I would say, and also some golden tassels. Since we already had our own revolver for the captain here, we decided to let Martin keep that one, and we would put the tassels on Mrs. beautiful uniform. Oh, you are looking dapper, madam. Now then, it is time for us to begin working on yet another project that is going to require quite a few components. Luckily, we've had a few meteorites strike the island, one of which being compacted machinery. Realistically, the only thing that we're going to be using components for are either cannons or sailing instruments, and it is going to be the latter of which because we plan on building more caravels for our fleet. Looks like we have a handful of ruffians to deal with though before we build our new ships, as the British have decided to come looking for their scouts that they lost previously. Good luck to you boys, as I believe the coyotes and the ravens have already had their fill of them. Thankfully for us, it would seem that they still have no idea of our encampment in the area on the island, and thus because of that we still have the element of surprise in our midst. Perhaps we should give them something of a wake-up call with maybe our hand mortar. What do you say, Martin? I think it's about time that we rock their socks for them, taking cover behind some ancient ruins here which were falling apart fairly easily. We would manage to kill their pony and their leader, which was pretty easy to do since we had already shredded her legs with the mortar. Now all we had to do was deal with her comrades, but even they wouldn't be that much of an issue as they were fleeing the area. The only problem with that is the fact that they ended up getting away, which also means that the Brits are going to know about us now. Not exactly ideal, but that was inevitable, and at the very least, at the end of the day, none of us were dead, and we were tended to, so I guess everything's okay for now. It wasn't all bad though, as we ended up getting a pretty officer's sword, and we also have a pony we can butcher and eat. Perhaps having the British outpost on the island isn't so bad after all. We could have them keep sending their little raids to us, and after we kill them, we can butcher their animals for food, and we can steal all of their muskets and sabers. Besides, their outpost isn't on the shore of the island, so we can't take our ships in to attack them, even if we could. I have a feeling their navy is far more superior, and of course we don't have near enough numbers for a land attack, so we just kind of have to deal with it anyway. Now with that finally over though, we could finish up our very next pirate caravel, adding 2 into our fleet of what we hope to be very many. Sticking with our onion theme, as we do have a pretty large onion farm here on the island, of course, we are going to be naming this ship the Blooming Onion as compared to our other, which is the Roaring Onion. Now I am recording this episode before the first one comes out, so of course if you have name suggestions, feel free to leave those in the comment section for any and all ships and or animals and yada yada, you know the drill, much appreciated. Given the new British outpost and all the attacks that we've been facing recently, I thought that it might be good for us to have some defenses around our fortification, these being just some simple sandbags, some wooden barricades of course, and some swivel cannons. I think it goes without saying, but these are going to be absolutely vital to our protection, as the cannons on our ship are going to do a lot of damage to our own city, and that's assuming that they could even reach the enemies where they're attacking from. Now that we can ensure that our rear is well defended, we're also going to be working on our kitchen with a proper cooking area here where we can go about making our meals, and also we added an extra dining seat, just, you know, in case we have guests, I suppose. An issue that we've been facing as well is the fact that we have a lot of meat expiring very quickly, and that we're basically just storing all of that meat in our storage tents along with our other resources and items like weapons. Not exactly ideal, so I wanted to build something of a slaughterhouse, and as you can see here we have many a wooden rack where we can actually store some hanging meat. And obviously it is also within close proximity to the kitchen. And again, touching back on the fact that we have our storage tents. Now don't get me wrong, I do like them, but we've been storing all of our onions in there along with everything else, and I really think that they should have a dedicated spot. So we are digging out a stone cellar on the inside of our kitchen, and this way all the food is very, very close to where we're cooking. Now I think that our kitchen and dining room are fully completed, at least for the time being, and this is going to be much more convenient. Also much more efficient. We don't have to walk very far to get the food, as mentioned several times, but we also don't get the debuff, the penalty in our work speed because it's not outside. With the essentials taken care of, at least in terms of our food production as well as storage, I think it's time that we take care of the basic accommodations of our other pirates and giving them some nice slate stone homes. I think we're going to be building these on the east side, as this is going to be where we are going to have our residential district for the fortified pirate city. And as you can see, these homes are nothing too special. The first floor is simply for eating and just some leisure, I suppose, while the second floor is simply for their bedrooms. Very small and very quaint. But enough about the damn building of the city. I hear you say, we're pirates, Rat Daddy, and we want to pillage, we want to loot. Well, my friends, as you can see, there is a British outpost on the main coast here just up the river, and I thought that this might be the perfect target for us. We may not be able to stop the outpost that's in the center of our island because we don't have enough troops for a ground invasion and the sea is our specialty, but one that's in the middle of a river, I think that we could take them on pretty easily. As we were all off sailing, I would check back in on our iguana back home. There were a lot of hyenas in the area, and I was very much afraid that the iguana was going to get eaten, so I set up a special area for them on the inside of our little building here, where they can eat onions and be happy in our absence. Unfortunately, it would also appear that the hyenas were sucking up all of our good liquor out of our storage tents, which is yet another downside to storing everything inside them. We need a proper liquor cabinet at some point. But as we're sailing, I thought it might be a good time for us to go ahead and give our iguana a proper name, and I am going to be naming it Sea Onion Leaf, with C standing for the first name of Chester. This name is a combination of the suggestions from our good friends Rocker66, 6006, and Giorban1271. Thank you both, and thank you to everyone that suggested a name. Now then, back to the action. Slowly but surely, we were sailing up a river towards the British outpost. Since it is newly founded, we thought, and as you can see, it is pretty bare bones for the time being, with very little defenses, other than sandbags and the rifles that they carry. Based on their gibbet cages here, it looks like they've taken this land from some local impid tribes. How typical of them, although I suppose I can't talk, as we tend to pillage without discrimination. Nevertheless, let's light this powder keg, baby. And so it begins, our absolute bombardment of this little outpost here, absolutely smoking and shredding everything within a short vicinity of the cannons. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish that I could tell you that we weren't enjoying this, but we were loving it, especially after all the attacks back on our island. When you mess with the bull, you cannot be shocked when you get the horns. These poor bastards were so desperate for any type of victory. At one point, they had even been clamoring to try to get into the water to attack our ships. Of course, this was a horrible idea, and eventually, after continuing to fire upon the outpost, we had killed enough of them that some tried to leave, and we would let them. Well, let is a strong word. We actually got a bit occupied because I realized we did a little bit of friendly fire, hitting our newest ship with the cannons of our oldest, and during this confusion, they got away. I was very concerned because we had done a lot of damage damage, so much so that we almost lost the blooming onion to this cannon fire, but we would immediately start tending to the wounds of Martin, who was manning it, who had only been shredded slightly, and we would immediately start to repair it. We also found a couple of British soldiers who were slightly injured from our cannon, slightly being the key word, as their body parts were pretty shredded as well, but we decided to start tending to one of their wounds so that we could try to take her prisoner. Oh my, what have we here? A British officer, eh? Lying next to the river, bleeding out. How I wish I could stick my saber into your jowl, but I'm afraid you are worth much more to us alive than you are dead, so I suppose we'll keep you from bleeding to death. Perhaps we'll recruit you or sell you into slavery, who knows? Something I do know for a straight up matter of fact is that we have plenty of weapons here that we could use to our own benefit or perhaps sell to some of the local tribes for money. We'll see. Now this has been a plundering for the ages. I'll tell my grandbabies about this, assuming I live that long. And if there's a man who can handle all this. With prisoners, plunder, and loot in tow, we begin sailing all the way back to our isle. Home sweet home, even sweeter with all of our new stuff. We'll need to be quick getting it out of the water, that way it doesn't deteriorate too fast, and we may want to get our prisoners out of there. I think they're drowning. For now, we don't currently have a prison, as you well know, so we're going to toss them inside of our slaughterhouse. I don't think they'll be going anywhere anyhow. They seem to be pretty injured. And look, we even managed to grab an authentic British tea set. Now we are bougie. Since we have all of these new weapons, not counting all the weapons that we currently have in our storage tins, I thought that it might be a great idea for us to have a proper place to store them, even if it is temporary for the time being. We'll have to figure that out later on, but for now we're going to build a very small armory in our main structure. As we were doing this, Baker, the British officer, ended up getting an infection in her left leg. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, it does seem as though her immunity was going much faster than the infection itself, but this officer needs a taste of the true pirate life. So Ms. whipped out the old rusty hacksaw and started hacking at her leg, but not to worry, the infection is gone and she has a nice little stump of wood to walk around on. Very befitting of her. Now, is that a good thing to do if we're going to sell her off as a slave, or even if we're going to recruit her as a pirate? No, of course not, but I think she needed to find out that she's not an officer anymore, and she is far away from any home that she used to know. Besides, hacking off her leg and giving her a pirate peg leg builds character. It's going to be a good transition for her, I feel. I really believe that, okay? For a few days, time would pass, and we would just go about our merry little way with our day-to-day duties of growing food and things of that sort, guarding or the outpost, that kind of shit, of course. But eventually, we would have Hazel, one of the British soldiers, not Baker the officer, of course, end up joining us. I think it's going to be pretty nice having some experienced soldiers among our plundering ranks. Of course, we made her some appropriate clothing and let her dye it to the appropriate colors. Since our other two pirates already have their own little cozy comfort homes, it felt fitting that we would also give one to Hazel, of course, as well. Fair is fair, and we are all about expanding this city as big and as fast as possible. Besides, with all the sailing and fighting that we do, a nice comfortable bed is one of the very small luxuries that we get to enjoy while we're back here at home. Don't get too used to it, Hazel. You'll be back out there slaughtering your fellow countrymen in no time. I truly believe that we are doing some pretty big things here in our little onion capital of the island. Big things. But there's going to be more of that in the very near future as we continue growing out our pirate company, our fleet of ships, and our crew in general. But that'll be next time. See you later. Well, look what we have here. A couple of buccaneers ready to sail the high seas, I hope. Welcome back, friendos, to the Pirate Empire, or what is becoming a pirate empire. Starting off pretty hot and heavy today, the first thing we're going to be doing is building a stone cellar in our butcher slaughterhouse here to store some additional food. We will be storing plenty of meat in there if for some reason our drying racks here become full. Mostly what we're going to be using using it for is some additional storage for our onions and other vegetation that we're growing to eat. And we're really only having to do this because the cellar that we built inside our kitchen is stuffed to the absolute brim with onions. I'm sure you've noticed that our prisoner Baker, the British officer, is still in our slaughterhouse as well, and we want to correct that little issue by going ahead and building a proper prison for her and any other soldiers, or really anyone else that we end up taking prisoner. Now this is going to be made out of slate, as is much of the structures and buildings around the city thus far, but we are doing some double layered doors, with the outer doors being wood and the inner doors being granite. That way we don't have her busting out, or anyone else busting out, so easily. And because the setting here is much more beautiful, it should also help us recruit prisoners much quicker to our pirate cause. And as we continue expanding our city, we're also going to be giving individual spaces and buildings to certain professions. For example, our stone cutting is going to be outsourced around our residential area here, and we are actually going to be giving it its own space with its own little, I guess you could say, stockyard full of chunks to cut up. As we were working on this new building, we had also finally recruited Baker into our ranks. No more an officer, now a filthy scallywag pirate like us. Welcome to a much more free and blissful life, my friend. Naturally, every pirate needs the proper pirating attire, and of course Baker is no different, so we quickly whipped up a soldier coat and a nice little hat for her. We ended up decking it out with the black of our pirate party, and we would also go ahead and let her equip a nice rifle and sword. Lock and load, sister, lock and load. Of course, having yet another member into our little pirate soiree here also means that she's going to need her own house, so we would end up building her a slate cottage along with our others. But you've already seen me build plenty of these cottages for our pirates. I think it's time that we start working on a new project, something a little bit out there that you might not be expecting. We're going to be mining out this large granite island. Naturally, given the fact that it's pretty far away from the shore, we would end up having to take our ship out there with the vast majority of all of our sailors. We would end up arriving at the island, and immediately we would start moving mountains, quite literally. For obvious reasons, we couldn't just end up leaving all of our members out here, especially not Captain Miz herself, so we would end up leaving Martin and Brown behind to complete the mining. But of course, to go about having them out here, we're going to need to have a proper camp with food and some places for them to sleep, so we did that before we departed back to our dock. Of course, Miz and Hazel are going to be needed back in the city for more construction and expansion projects, as well as day-to-day operations. But out here on this little granite isle, I'm going to stop teasing the project now. We are going to be removing all of this granite mountain here and replacing it with a lighthouse. That way, when we're sailing on dark and stormy nights, we'll know to avoid this area so that we don't hit any of the rock or mountain formations here. Back home, as I mentioned earlier on in the video, we have a gigantic-ass stockpile of onions already, so we're going to stop growing onions for just a little bit, and we're actually going to begin focusing on growing some tobacco leaves. Not only would we be able to roll ourselves some cigars and cigarettes, or possibly even sell them after rolling them, but we could just sell the leaves in bulk. As I'm sure you've noticed, all of our pirates here are basically stone-cutting machines, including Baker herself. So actually, we're going to be sending Baker back out to the little granite island where we're building the lighthouse, and along with that, we're going to have her cut up a bunch of these stone chunks out there, not only to get them the hell out of the way, but this way we don't have to try and carry on our ship the stone blocks that we've been cutting from the shore and yada yada yada. It's just going to be much more efficient. We also had a weapons trader from our French allies, our benefactor. We ended up selling them some of the mediocre muskets and what have you that we had in storage, and we made a measly 200 some silver. Better than nothing. Jumping back over to the lighthouse, though, we had finally finished up all of our mining, and now we're just finishing up cutting these stone blocks so we can build the lighthouse itself. I hope I'm not giving you whiplash by going back and forth. I promise that is almost over. For the time being, we are going to be bringing all of our pirates home away from the island. Reason being on that is because we need glass to go about building the lighthouse, as one might imagine, and to go about building glass, we are going to need a proper forge. Coincidentally, this just so happens to be our very next project. Now, not only did we want to build a forge so we can create glass, although that is quite important to us at at the moment, and it might be a resource that we can sell in the future, we were also possibly interested in eventually creating our own weapons. Don't hold me to that, we'll have to see how things go, but let's just say that onions aren't the only hot commodity that we're interested in making money on. We wasted absolutely no time smelting down chunks into our glass panes. However, later on in the night, it would seem that we have a pain in our ass. Seems that the Brits are finished sending their scouts out looking for their missing members, and they've actually sent out a proper fighting party, led by an officer wielding a very interesting looking rifle. Rushing to our defenses and manning our cannon, we were more than ready. But it seems like they're going to be preparing for a moment, so we were thinking that perhaps Martin here, and his hand mortar of course, could take care of a few of them before they come this way. Wearing all black, it wasn't all that hard for Martin to sneak up in the dead of night under the cover of shadows. They would end up noticing him, but they were a little bit too focused on holding their position, which was a big mistake. After killing one of them, he would continue pushing forward towards the group, taking cover behind some nearby hills, bullets whizzing by his head and ricocheting off nearby stone. As the sun was finally beginning to rise though, Martin was fully in plain view, and he would end up taking one more life of these soldiers before he would finally have to retreat back to our defenses. Well, it ain't much, but it is honest work. At least picking off a few of them before they make their way here should help us out a little bit. Speaking of which, here comes the onslaught. Ready yourselves, men, this is going to be quite jarring. Their tactics were somewhat clever. As the main group of soldiers were coming from the front, the officer would attempt to sneak up behind us to attack us. Unfortunately for her, though, Ms. is quite familiar with their tactics. As quickly as we noticed what was happening, we ganged up against the officer and her modified weapon, easily defeating her. As for what remained of their forces, it appeared to be one line soldier who also would quickly fall to our bullets. Unlike his officer though, this fortunate chap was still alive, profusely bleeding, but still alive. You know, this poor skinny little chap though looks a little bit young, hardly soldier material I'd say, and I believe this hypothesis to be true as upon closer inspection he wasn't very good at most things. As a matter of fact, I'm shocked they even put a rifle in his hands. As he was gasping for air through the bloody bullet hole in his neck, we managed to make out that he said he was only 13 years old. My God, he's just a child. Poor little bastard, we can't kill him. For God's sake, he has no idea why he's even out here. They may have promised him some sweets or something to put a rifle in his hand and make him shoot at us. No, we're going to tend to his wounds and also to his psyche. It's time that the boy learn that the pirate way of life is the true way of life, and perhaps we would even take the boy under the captain's wing. Just in case anyone was curious, the captain had suffered from a severe mortar shot a few years ago and was actually sterile, meaning she couldn't have any children, but she had always wanted a son, always dreaming of something much bigger than herself. She was dealt a very bad hand in life, and all she had ever wanted had never come true, and everything that she needed and required to even survive, she had to struggle for. It's hardly any wonder why she thrives off the backs and the loot and plunder of others. But so is the world, a dog-eat-dog situation. It's not all sunshine and rainbows out there, folks, let me tell you. But speaking of light, we are going to be finishing up our lighthouse finally. Nothing too fancy here, just a large granite structure that is going to have glass on each side of it, of course, with a gigantic bonfire in the middle. Now thankfully these bonfires will last for many weeks on average, so we shouldn't have to refuel it all that often, but when we do, we'll have to take one of the caravels out to do so. Now while we're still on the topic of our caravels, as I've mentioned multiple times, we want to increase the size of our fleet, of course, with many more ships, but also, as I've mentioned many times, we don't currently have any wood. Now obviously we could go and trade with some of the fringe or even our tribal allies to purchase some of this wood, but why would we do that when we could just as easily sail to the main continent and set up a logging camp for ourselves? So that's exactly what we decided to do. Ah, such a beautiful, lush, and vibrant different forest, so much different than our desert island, so much more beautiful, you could even say. But it doesn't seem that this area is vacant. Interestingly enough, this is not the British nor the Prussians nor any tribespeople. These seem to be our fellow pirates, though of course not part of our band of pirates. Not with such a stupid looking flag anyway, and their members were hardly any easier on the eyes. Regardless of who they are in our new logging camp. We began bombarding their little makeshift camp here that they've created, although the water was quite shallow, making it easy for them to come out and to fire at the ship, so we had to be very careful. We did manage to kill one of them with our ship's cannons though, and as for the other, we would actually dock at the shore and then hop out and begin firing at them. Looks like this chap may have just survived though. Sorry about this, old friend, you're pretty mangled up and you seem to be suffering pirate's code and all, you understand. Well, I'd say that takes care of that, and look, we have our very own camp now. Not only that, but we also have some new interesting weapons, such as a pirate grenade. Oh, the ingenuitive type, eh? Well, I'm sure that'll help us out in our conquest of plunder, and also logs for the time being. Speaking of which, after officially declaring this area as our own, we would immediately get to work on, well, first washing the blood off our hands in the ocean, but then chopping down many an oak tree. The majority of these logs, of course, we're going to be taking back to our home island, but some of them we're going to be using to build ourselves some wooden canopies. Now, I know I could have just kept the tents that were here previously, but we need something a little bit more defensive, even if it comes at the cost of our own comfort. This is an unknown area to us, after all. But while Martin and Hazel are acquiring lumber and timber for our fleet of ships, back home we had finally recruited Hughes into our ranks. Welcome aboard, lad. A strapping young fella like yourself has many adventures that await him in the very near future, and under the captain's command, we will be flourishing. Of course, we would do the standard of creating him a proper soldier coat and a nice little cap, and we would let him go ahead and dye it to our standard black. But we would also end up giving him some proper weapons to defend himself and to also help us with our mission. But this weapon that we gave him was the old modified rifle of his commanding officer. I thought it fitting. Poetic even. In the meantime, Hazel and Martin started out the next day by hauling all the resources from the ship in from the ship onto dry land, of course, and also had themselves a nice drink of tea to get their logging started. Now, it didn't take us very long at all to go about collecting all this lumber, but the biggest issue by far that we face with our logging camp isn't cutting down the wood, it's hauling it across the sea back home. So we would expend a good bit of this lumber to actually make ourselves another ship to help out with the hauling process. You may notice, of course, that this is not a caravel, but this is indeed a cog without any weapons. This unarmed vessel is not going to be near as suspicious as our caravels carrying our beautiful pirate flag, of course, and thus it should be able to go under the radar of many of the military and naval forces in the area. But also, the cog ship design actually has double the carrying capacity as a pirate caravel, such as our blooming onion. Perfect for hauling a lot of logs, of course, but this also does come at the cost of speed. Nevertheless, this little beauty is technically part of our fleet and now needs a proper name. We are going to be going with the name of Seaworth. This wonderful name suggestion comes from our good friend Bad Patat, and I do very well believe that this is a Game of Thrones reference with House Seaworth, if I'm not mistaken, and I love it, so thank you. Not only is this bad boy going to be carrying plenty of logs back and forth, but I do plan on using it for trade in the future with many other items like our tobacco leaves, our onions, as well as many other resources. To prep for the arrival of our timber-bearing cog on its way back home, we wanted to set up something of a lumberyard, I suppose, and or timber depot in the city. Essentially just a new and improved, proper, and organized storage facility for all of our wood, logs, timber, so on and so forth. I'm sure you understand. All in the name of expansion and also efficiency. I will say that I like the island that we've decided to settle on for our pirate fortification and city and base and so on and so forth, but it is a little bit frustrating at times not having so much wood at the tip of our fingers when we need it for so many things. All part of the challenge and in good sport though. Where others have failed, we will thrive and survive. Now, as Hazel is heading back to our logging camp though, we're going to be loading the cog up with plenty of tobacco leaves as well as onions to do a bit of trading with nearby tribes once more. As we would set sail on the open sea, we could really tell a difference in a cog loaded down with tobacco and onions compared to our much more speedy fighting vessels. Though slower, we would eventually end up arriving at a tribal settlement where they actually had someone by the name of Maker enslaved. We were going to buy him his freedom so that he may join our band of merry pirates. And since Hazel is heading directly back to the logging camp, he would have plenty of time to prove his worthfulness. Nothing like a bit of manual labor hacking down oak trees to show us that you really care. Just before their arrival though, around about midday, Martin was taking a well-deserved and well-earned nap in his canopy, but a red-bearded pirate gentleman in a large red greatcoat was beginning to approach the camp. Worryingly, it would appear that he has his very own hand mortar. Martin would awake and spot the gentleman in the distance approaching. Looks like it's going to be hand mortar v hand mortar. We spotted the coward attempting to hide behind some rocks, but faced with us in the distance, he would be forced to fight. A very destructive and explosive shootout would take place, with mortar shells going off every which way. In the heat of the fight, we would swap to our revolver to hopefully get an edge up over the bastard, but he would end up getting a mortar shell off on us. Martin's right ear was completely shredded, blood streaming down his face and into his eyes, completely discombobulated, as I'm sure you could imagine. He would immediately rush to cover to try and collect himself and regain composure before firing his rifle off from a distance at this big red bastard. Though, given his injuries, it was very difficult for him to manage to land any shots, and the jolly red giant would begin heading towards our lumber camp. Thank God as well, for I thought that Martin might start to bleed out before this battle had finally finished. Now with our enemy distracted, we could tend to our wounds. But this battle was far from over, as Hazel and Maker had finally arrived back at the camp on the Seaworth. Maker would hop off the ship and begin approaching our enemy from the south, as Hazel began approaching from the north, and with their combined efforts, we finally took him down. Phew, now that was a close call. You, sir, are one tough SOB. So much so that I actually think that you might be a useful asset to us. I suppose we could keep you alive, at least long enough for you to meet the captain. Something tells me she'll be interested in your services. Thankfully, the Seaworth only took a little bit of damage to the hull with the explosion of the mortar shells, and after a few hours of repair, she was good as new. If you ask me, I think we've seen more than enough excitement with our little logging camp, and we also have plenty of wood. I believe it's time that we head back to the old Mother Island. Speaking of, with the prospect of having many new pirates under our employment, I thought it might be a good idea for us to work on a new building for our residential area. Chances are we're going to be taking a lot of prisoners in the very near future, and thus I want to make something of a barracks, not just a cottage. I also heard a little bit of commotion while we were building the barracks, and I come to find out that there was a giant hole right in the middle of our dock. I was a bit perplexed by this, but it looks like this was due to a meteor shower. For whatever reason, our home island here seems to be a magnet for meteorites. Thankfully, it hadn't hit our ship, and there was just enough of the dock left for us to dock our Seaworth as well as our blooming onion. The journey sailing back home was so long and treacherous that poor Martin was absolutely exhausted, so much so that he passed out and continued to sleep on the dock for several hours. hours. We let him get his rest. Now that we have the entirety of our crew back home, we can finally use up all of our manpower finishing our brand new barracks. This bad boy is going to be able to hold up to about 6 pirates in the very near future once we get them recruited, and we might start building more of these around the city and kind of reserving our actual cottages for some of our more special folk like Martin, who's essentially our right-hand man or first mate. Glad they got back home with all that lumber when they did too, since we are going to be mining out this meteorite and fixing our dock, thankfully. Strangely enough, it would seem that global temperatures have suddenly risen. This could be maybe due to many meteorites and or asteroids, I suppose would be the better term, hitting the planet in a very short period of time, melting the polar ice caps. Although I'm no scientist, I'm just a pirate, of course. However, with global temperatures rising, this does mean that resources are going to become quite scarce and factions are going to be fighting over them. This does also mean that we could capitalize by selling more of our onions and other resources to these factions. So kind of a win for us, I suppose. Now, given the fact that we already want to do a lot of trading anyhow, and given the current circumstances that we're going to have a lot of resources that are going to be in demand, on the outskirts of the city we would end up building a secondary dock, this one specifically for our trade vessels. And adding on to that, since we're going to be doing all of our trade vessels on this side of the city, we also want to have a trade depot and a warehouse with all of our resources that we sell on this side of the city just next to the dock here. Essentially just a gigantic warehouse where we're going to be storing all of our resources. Long gone are the days where we need our primitive storage methods like digging a pit in the ground and hiding all of our silver and cocoa beans and tobacco leaves there. Now we can store them in a proper sealed facility, and a sturdy, secure one at that. Not only is this facility much more secure, but of course it is going to be much more efficient as well as convenient having it right next to all of our new ships. Speaking of, it's time for us to increase the size of our fleet once more with yet another cog ship. And with that, our new trading depot is finally completed. Now, of course, if you fine folks have any ideas for a name for our new cog trading vessel, be sure to let me know in the comments section down below. I am working on this episode before the last even comes out, so if you've already provided a name, rest assured that I will be checking that episode as well. But enough with the trading vessels. It's time that we finally have one that is prepped for combat. Yet another pirate caravel, making it a fleet of 3. Not counting the cogs, of course. Not just any caravel though, this is going to be our flagship, and we shall be giving it the intimidating name of Black Widow. This name has been provided by our compadre Beau Furlong 8944, and is somewhat based on the fact that our great Captain Miz here is indeed something of a widow, even though the two were never really married. Her ex-fiance, you could say, who died, and I think Black Widows normally kill their partners, and she didn't kill him, but nevertheless, I love the name. I noticed on the main continent it would appear that 2 factions are already battling over some nearby resources, while this warming of the globe really is taking shape already. I'm thinking next episode we may try to get tangled up with that a little bit, but we'll see how we're feeling and where it goes. But before the episode ends, I wanted to mention something that our good friend Storyteller Nylan9157 points out, as well as what many of you other fine folk have enlightened me on, that we're not exactly pirates. We are, but we would be more akin to privateers, given the fact that we are essentially paid by the French either in trade, plunder, or even just monetary sums. I do agree, and I think it's really cool that you guys are invested in this enough to really educate me on this kind of stuff, and I really like it, I love it, I appreciate it. I probably will still use the 2 terms privateers and pirates interchangeably just because it flows better for me, but I love it still, so thank you all for that. But my friends, I must bid you farewell, for in the very near future though, we shall be getting plenty more riches, plunder, and seeing many more new horizons. Until then. Well, welcome back, my scurvy scallywags, to our little pirate empire that we're building. Today, my friends, we have much to do, such as places to plunder and people to rob, of course. At the end of last episode, we had actually captured one of our fellow pirates, if you could even call him that, as he appears to be from a separate faction. With that being the case, it's time that we totally strip him of his identity, and to go about doing so, to start off, we're going to take that flag of his and we are going to be repurposing it. Personally, I think it looks much better on Hughes anyhow, carrying our beautiful skull and bones. We are going to allow him to carry it into battle and on the high seas, as he is the youngest member, of course. God knows the boy could use a boost in morale and also indoctrination. Now then, focusing back on our city, this small little horn on our island. I wasn't all that sure what we should end up putting here, but since we have plenty of tents and other camping gear, I thought it might be a good idea to set up some little camps here, not too far away from our trading depot and our docks. That way any traders that we have for the time being can stay here, some of their less wealthy members. Not to worry though, by the end of the episode, I think I'll be building somewhere different. That way, if we have any French officers or someone of maybe a higher stature who need better accommodations, they'll have somewhere they can stay while they're here too. We also built ourselves a little horse-drawn carriage here. Perhaps we'll use it to drive the officers and others who visit around the city. Not really for trading or anything like that, as we are currently on an island, and as you well know, the only other occupants of the island tend to be the British, and yeah, we're not trading with them, obviously. However, taking a look at our island here, I noticed that they have set up yet another outpost, and this one is actually on the shore of the island, hopefully within firing distance of our ship's cannons. I think we'll head on over and see what we can do with that. If we're lucky, we may have arrived soon enough that they haven't built any frigates yet, and perhaps they won't even have that many soldiers. Not to worry though, back home we're going to be leaving Maker behind to warden our friend Aloe here, currently sitting in our jail cell. Taking him with us could be a gigantic risk, because if he gets out of the brig on one of our caravels, he could easily jump over the side and try to swim to the shore away from us. It wouldn't take us very long at all, sailing around the island until we would finally reach the shores of this new outpost. Thankfully, it appears to be a little bit smaller than we had anticipated, and they don't even have any proper ships. It seems like they're relying on canoes. It is possible that they are experiencing the same issue here that we are, where we don't have enough wood to build enough ships. And perhaps their main government doesn't want to expend resources on a tiny little sand island in the middle of the ocean. Either way, I'd say it's a blessing for us. I don't expect this to be all that difficult, with all three of our ships in our fleet arriving just near their docks. Rise and shine, boys. Our ship's cannons would roar to life with large lead and iron balls flying through the air. Hell, there might have even been a stone chunk or two in there, whatever we could fit down the barrel, realistically. And their little base here was quickly turning into a large stick that had been thrown into a big wood chipper. After our first initial bombardments, we had completely cleared out the outpost, its residents fleeing for their lives. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Normally, I would say that we should tear up these bridges and other things for their resources like wood, which we desperately need, but there's hardly anything left, and it would be a lot of hassle, to be honest with you. We did have plenty of silver and other plunder lying around. See that there, young Hughes? Go ahead and pick it up there, lad. It's your first taste of riches, true riches. And there's a lot more where that came from, son. Just stick with us. By God, Baker, we might just make a pirate out of the boy yet. Lad's got a hankering for money. That's a good start, I'll say. Now, if only we could teach him how to sail. Like I said, we had a decent bit of money lying around here, but not only that, we also had many other other resources such as cloth, cigars, cigarettes, tobacco, and also weapons, of course. So naturally, since we're already sailing out and about on the ocean, we decided to head up northeast a little bit to one of the tribal settlements to do some trading. And we would also end up visiting the little shelling site here, where we have two factions fighting for resources due to the global temperatures rising, as we saw last episode. Even from the sea, we could see a gigantic fire burning in the distance. Looks to be a small little village with a British frigate docked, with many a Brit and Frenchman jabbing each other in the guts with their bayonets. If I had to throw out a guess, I would say that the Redcoats have docked here and attempted to sack this little French village right before their reinforcements arrived, most likely looking for food and other resources. Initially, we had hoped to maybe commandeer that frigate, but it looks like it's going to be burnt here in about 5 seconds, so instead I think we'll just pull up to the dock and open fire. Now, this wasn't exactly the best idea, as our cannons can't really tell friend from foe, but I doubt anyone's going to really notice that we were the ones who hit the French. And besides, it was the safest option for our pirates, of course. Both parties would end up fleeing the land, and I could see quite a bit of carnage. That gentleman there missing the legs in the French blue could be our handiwork, but our little secret. There wasn't really much here for us except for some of the sailing instruments and reinforced wooden panels from the British frigate, so I think we'll take those back home with us. The journey for which to arrive back home would of course take a few days. In the meantime, it looks like we might have a serious threat on our hands. Looks to be a woman with a very interesting rifle with 3 dogs in her company. Hard to say who she's affiliated with, but something tells me she's not here for a tea party. Maker would rush out to man the cannon for her arrival, shredding many a part of her body that gave her quite a jar. I think this fight just became a little bit easier, with that blast hitting her directly and disorientating her even more so. Something tells me she's gonna have a very hard time hitting us with that rifle. We rushed through our main building here, trying to cut her off on the other side, but to our surprise, she would end up running away. And then something of a shootout would begin. Naturally though, since she can't hit the broadside of a barn at the moment, and because Maker has his trusty hand mortar, this fight would end just as soon as it began. Well, she put up a pretty decent fight, and if nothing else, she did manage to cause us to destroy part of our building. We still needed to take care of those blood-sniffing hounds, though, filthy mongrels, with a blunderbuss in his hands as they began chasing Maker throughout the city. He would blast them and kill them quite easily as well. Now then, the question remains, who are you? You're obviously not with the British or the Prussians. Something tells me having those dogs with you means that you're most likely a bounty hunter. Well, you were, at least. I suppose we shouldn't be surprised by this mysterious, unexpected guest. I'm sure the captain has a pretty penny on her head all around the main continent. Either way, I suppose we should thank you because you did bring this nice new rifle into our midst. Since Maker is the one who finally took her out, well, he was the only one here technically, we will let him keep it. Now, time to repair the building before the captain and the others return home. We'll be sure to report this to them without explaining that we destroyed a good portion of it. They might understand. I mean, it was kind of like killing a fly with a shotgun. There's bound to be some damage, but it's best that they think we're as safe and strategic, I guess, as possible. Thanks to our lighthouse guiding us last night, it was quick and easy to find our way back home, and we ended up docking and releasing all of our brand new cargo, resources, weapons, and anything else that we hadn't already sold. Now all we gotta do is get all this shit hauled in. Our little pirate/privateer merchant city here is doing quite well, but there's always more money to be made. And in fact, we have plenty of tobacco leaves in storage that need to be sold. For this little trade voyage, we are going to be sending out Hughes and Martin, each one in their own separate cog ship. It'll be good for Hughes to man his own cog, that way he can get used to sailing. With Martin being our right-hand man, there is no one better than he to take care of Hughes on this voyage, although, of course, it is going to take them some time, so we'll check back in on them in a little while. Meanwhile, back home, we're going to be working on some new buildings around the city. In particular, we are going to be making a tailoring shop, as well as a research building. Pretty self-explanatory here, but I just wanted some upgraded storage and dedicated storage for all of our leathers, and most importantly, our cloth. We may end up making some uniforms or something, perhaps for the French or somebody, to sell to them in the very near future, and of course we also plan on tackling a few research projects pretty quickly as well. And of course, since we have an ever-growing population, we are once again going to be building some stone cozy cottages. Now of course, we do have our barracks still, but as we get more familiar with many of our members, we want them to have their own proper homes to themselves. It was during this construction period when Martin and Hughes would finally return home from their trade voyage with, well, not much silver, but it was an okay amount, I suppose, for a first trip of Hughes's. With that, our new residential area was completed, and as you can see, we're really trying to beautify things, as we're not just a bunch of filthy pirates and salty dogs, we're privateers in our own personal city, and we want things to look nice. With all the construction out of the way, we could finally start on some proper research as well, with that being naval tactics. Now, what this is going to allow us to do, along with those resources that we took from the British frigate, is to build some frigates of our own. Maker would get right to work on that for us, and in the meantime, we have some tribes people to do some trading with, as we have a shaman merchant right in our town square. Other than their silver, shaman merchants normally didn't have anything that we were too interested in, except for their books and tales of woe, which we would end up purchasing one. Reading helps us keep the boredom away out here on the Isle. During this time, we also finally ended up recruiting Aloe. He was a bit of a tough nut to crack, but understandably so. That's the type of person that we would want in our pirate crew. A big old fella for shooting and fighting, but not easily persuaded against us. We put a good old Baker rifle in his hands and gave him some more appropriate attire, of course. Now, if you, such as I, have a keen eye, you may notice he's only gripping that rifle with one hand. And this would be because we had actually shot it off. Well, Martin shot it off during their little skirmish when they first met, so it's perhaps a better idea to let him carry his sword. Now, with our population growing, we have been building new homes and barracks and things like that, and of course, all of those areas are going to have their own seating and tables for people to enjoy their company with other folks or by themselves, and also to eat, but the vast majority of people are still eating in the kitchen of our main area, so I wanted to upgrade our tables and seating there. Looks like our dining room beautification, though, is going to have to wait, as we have some impid tribes people who have come to try and sack our city. Oh, you poor sods. Much bigger and better fighting parties have tried, and all have failed. Since they were coming in such a large group, the captain herself would actually go out and start trying to build a cannon. However, this would be interrupted by a few different attacks by these tribespeople, and after a while we just kind of realized that we weren't going to be able to build this cannon, and it was time for us to fight. Their initial wave of warriors would begin coming towards us, and we would stay in a tight formation together, muskets at the ready firing at them. Thankfully, each of their barrages of flaming arrows would completely miss us, and we never got quite close enough for them to use their flaming breath. Something that was a top priority for us. As you could imagine, we didn't want to be scorched and burned. Eventually, though, after killing many of them and injuring quite a few more, we would put them on the run. Now that they're running away, we could focus on taking some of their injured members with decent skill sets in. Now, we would actually prefer some sailors from perhaps the Brits, the French, Prussians, yada yada yada, or even some other pirates as our growing pirate crew, but the impid warriors like this are pretty used to roughing it, and they're also pretty tough, so we'll take take them. But other impids weren't the only creatures that were going to join our crew. We would also have Aloe go out and begin attempting to tame some coyote. My initial idea here was to have some of these skinny little doggos tamed. We could breed them and then use them as attack dogs, but we'll see where that goes. Since we only have the one in the area right now, we're going to be treating it more like a dog, and we're actually going to let Hughes keep it as a pet. Now eventually we might put some armor on it, we might breed it, I don't know, we'll see. Either way, I do know that every young boy needs a dog companion. We had also gotten some French traders arriving on our isle here who were telling us about a warrant that was out for one of their traitorous soldiers. Apparently this lady was wanted for sabotage for working with the Brits. Now, we're not too keen on bounty hunting, but for our allies, I suppose we could make an exception. Besides, they're going to pay us pretty handsomely anyhow. So, Martin, Hazel, and Hughes would set sail due north to arrive at this little encampment where the target is hiding out. As you well know, this is going to take a while, so in the meantime, we also ended up finishing our research into naval tactics. Of course, meaning that now we have the proper knowledge to build our own frigate, as well as a handful of other ships, but we still need the resources to do so, and of course this means we need plenty of reinforced wooden panels. A long and tedious process of making them, but well worth it for a sturdy ship. And we would waste absolutely zero time building our very first frigate. Now, as this is going to be our strongest, fastest, and most durable ship, it is now going to be our new flagship. Given that this is the case, we are going to be renaming it the Black Widow XXL, since it is much larger than our current Black Widow ship. We'll leave the name the same on that one, since I, well, already named it that, and it's already got the appropriate paint job. Not only is the new flagship very sturdy, but it also has the same amount of cannons that fire much harder and seemingly much faster. I can't wait for our enemies to see this bad boy pulling up off the shore. Speaking of which, Martin and the others had almost arrived at this outpost, sailing upriver against the current, making it extremely slow, of course, but eventually we would arrive at a small little landing here where we planned on having Hughes staying behind along with the ship, get him some experience in with that, but also keeping him out of reach of danger and having his head shot off by a bunch of British riflemen hiding in the tree lines. This little trip was very tedious. I'm really hoping that we get a little bonus with our reward money, but I suppose we'll have to see. After several hours of traversing the treacherous jungle landscape, we would finally arrive. A strange little stone hut with defenses all around it. Luckily for us, the dense vegetation of the jungle will make it quite easy for us to sneak up. I found our target, and it appears that she's simply wielding a sword, and her cohort a Baker rifle. Although I don't think it'll be all that difficult, we should still be quite cautious. Caution, yes, but silence and sneaking isn't exactly Martin's style. Well, I think that very well may have gotten their attention. We would begin tracking down the guardsman and firing our mortar, killing him, and next up was going to be the target. And since things were getting a little bit more close quarters, we decided to swap over to our trusty revolvers, and I'd call that a job well done. Target is down, and her friend is actually laying over there bleeding out. Initially, I thought we killed them, but I suppose the jungle animals will help finishing them off. Now, time to load up this corpse and start heading north a bit more. I hope they have pemmican around here somewhere. It's going to be a long walk. After several hours of journeying, we finally arrived. We fulfilled our warrant, and we got paid. No extra bonus, unfortunately, although we did end up selling some of the weapons and other things to them that we found at the camp. It was time for us to start sailing back home. We may not have gotten a bonus, but the French would make up for it in terms of other ways, such as a trade caravan back at the base, where we would end up selling them many a weapon here as well that we've gotten from several different raids trying to attack us. We made a good few fistfuls of silver, and we even bought some beautiful pauldrons for our captain. I know these aren't actually called pauldrons, but I forgot forgot the word for them. This was a very fitting piece of attire for the captain's gorgeous uniform, but I continue calling her captain, and many of you have pointed out in the comments, given the size of our pirate crew and fleet by this point and us being privateers, she wouldn't exactly be that anymore, would she? As pointed out by our good friend Leonixok, I apologize, I've definitely butchered your name, but Ms. wouldn't exactly be a captain anymore. She would actually be a commodore. There were so many incorrect pronunciations in that, and I'd like to apologize, but I think that this new title is much more befitting. And it looks like some other folks are beginning to take us a little bit more seriously as well, including our enemies, the British, as they've set up some peace talks on our island. Well, of course, we can't just leave them hanging out there. We should go out and try to make friends, I suppose, so we decided to reroute Martin and the others to stop in at this little nearby peace talk negotiation area. It looks like a temporary little village that they've set up in the last few days. With so many ships under their command here, it's a little strange that they're looking to make peace. Looks like one of their officers is waiting on us with a little kettle full of tea. How typical. Well, we were coming up on the village and preparing to dock. It's time that we end this feud and this fight with the Brits, and it's time that we turn them into a proper ally. Oh, you didn't think I was serious, did you? You really think that we were going to bite the hand that feeds? The French are our only allies for now. Peace talks. The way I see it, they invaded our island and are trying to prevent us from doing what we do best. This was nothing more than a grotesque display of dominance, and we won't take any part in it. You sick bastards, we'll have peace when you're all dead and off our island, and we'll make damn sure that happens. Finally, after a very long and very eventful journey, Martin, Hughes, and Hazel have returned home, dropping off all their goods, of course, though we can't help but wonder just what the Brits are going to do now. We thought that they hated us before, but after this, after we practically spit in their face, I hate to see what comes next. Though whatever it is, I'm sure we can handle it. But the best way for sure to handle our enemies is to continue growing and expanding our empire on the island. A larger base and fortification is going to make it all that much more difficult for them to try to defeat us. One of these buildings that we need is a proper tavern. My opinion, the burning sands of our home island here are dry enough. It's time we had a proper place for us, not only us as a matter of fact, but all of our traders and visitors who come here to wet our whistles properly. I think the only thing we're currently missing are some proper recreation spots for everyone to enjoy some poker and blackjack and stuff like that, but we'll need to grow a little bit more cotton so we have enough cloth to do that. We do currently have some great storage facilities for all of our double-aged liquor as well as beer, and we also have some rooms that we're going to be renting out. Now, earlier on this episode, I was talking about some rooms like this that we would rent out to maybe French officers or some merchant leaders, people like that who are a little bit more important than the usual crewmates, and this is where that'll be. Many of you fine folks have been suggesting a tavern, and I very much appreciate it. Thank you all for the idea. In particular, our friend Six Wing Zombie had the name for the tavern, and that being Drunk Hyena, very reminiscent of the time that all the hyena came and drank up all our good liquor, so I love it. If you were paying attention, you might be also asking why there were a bunch of alligators running around in our streets, and I was actually asking myself the same question. Looks like they're some type of battle animals, and I suppose our pirates threw out some scraps of meat or something, and they've become quite accustomed to staying here and being fed by us. It is possible that the Brits were trying to tame these animals and train them to attack us or someone else, and they've gotten loose. Who knows, but it looks like they're ours now, so if you'd like to name them, be sure to do so, as well as our coyote. As you can see, we built him a little pen just off the side of the tavern. Maybe we'll start charging people to come over and pet them or something like a zoo. Either way, we're going to keep them well fed, and hopefully they'll take care of us. We also had a great name by our friend Connor V1V for our main building, with that being Vidal Vindictum. Once again, apologies on the pronunciation, but it is Latin for widow's revenge. Revenge, yet another very fitting name, given our leader's past with her fiancé being taken far too soon from us by those damn dirty redcoats. And before we wrap up the episode here, it looks like we have another pirate under our command, one of the impids going by the name of Kevaz, which I'm probably just going to refer to as Kev, has joined us. Seems like he's much more familiar with a bow and arrow than he is a rifle, but he'll get used to it. Besides, it was nice to finally have yet another impid aboard the crew. Now finally someone other than the Commodore herself knows what it's like to have that burning feeling in your gut. Quite literally. We've accomplished some pretty big things this episode, and we've expanded the city even further. I think next episode we might start trying to build some defensive walls to help us kind of cap off our territory here. But that'll be next time. I'll see you later. Goodbye. Well, welcome back, you filthy, scurvy, peg-legged scallywags. I'm ever so glad you could once again join me today for more pirating and privateering matters. As you well know, the last few episodes we've been putting a lot of time into expanding our city, and the beginning of this episode is going to be no different, I'm afraid, as we are going to be adding in a very new building that is actually going to be a dedicated armory. Whereas previously we've been keeping them in our main building, the Widow's Revenge, as it were, we are now going to have a very dedicated armory just above the residential housing of all of our privateering pirates. This will make it quick and easy if we were to get attacked, say, in the middle of the day or the dead of night, either one or any time in between, for our pirates to rush here and grab the weapons they need to defend themselves. After construction was completed, we had also finally recruited the impid known as Fortifying into our ranks, one of the impid tribespeople that we had taken prisoner from a raid last episode. Welcome aboard, lassie. To celebrate the occasion of our two new crew members from last episode, and also for Rock joining us right now, Maker has decided to throw a swinging party in the tavern. Oh, no doubt tonight's going to be a long one, a real banger for the history books. We are going to be filling our bellies full of some rum and maybe some fish stew. I'm sure those will go great together. Ah, yes, everyone was having a great time. Perhaps a little too great, so great in fact that they were distracted by the initial raid that was just around the corner. A large group of folks without any uniform attire. They seemed to come from all walks of life. Not only that, but they also appeared to have many a dog with them as well. Bounty hunters, no doubt, led by a familiar face. The infamous bounty hunter known as King, a leader and entrepreneur in his own bounty hunting business. He and our Commodore have crossed paths before. She was once his prisoner, and he is also the reason that she's missing a few limbs. Unfortunately, it looks like we'll be ending our soiree a bit early, as we're all rushing out of the tavern into our defensive line at the edge of the city. A few of our privateers had also rushed to one of the nearby caravels at the dock. Let's hope that they're close enough to the shore that we can hit them with our cannons. Speaking of which, our cannon at the edge of the city managed to take out one of these horrific hunters. For whatever reason, though, they were still preoccupied with the tavern, perhaps thinking that we were all still inside. Nevertheless, this would give us an opportunity to flank them. Our caravel would manage to take a life or two as well, getting some action, but also getting chased away by gunfire and a horde of German shepherds. If one of those filthy, ferocious mutts were to jump aboard, we would be in pretty bad shape. By this point, Miz and Martin had led the others back through the city and out the other side to the shoreline, engaging with the bounty hunters, or what's left of them. We would still attempt to flank them as well with the cannons of our caravel, but we ended up hitting our tavern. Now this next part's a bit messy and sloppy, so try to stick with me here as I attempt to narrate as I see. The bounty hunters and we were all in the town square here at the docks fighting back and forth. Many a mortar shell was going off and many a musket ball flying through the air. We killed several of them, but we also took several injuries. At a certain point, we had killed so many of their hounds, in fact, that they were attempting to run away. But Miz would not and could not allow this filthy bounty hunter to get loose. Oh, look at that, he's still alive. He'll wish that he died from that initial cut. We have much worse fates in store for you, King. Let's see, what is a fate that would be worse than death? Ah, yes, going bounty hunting, being taken prisoner by your target, and being forced into slave labor. We may have won the battle, but Miz took quite a shredding to her right eye from King's hand mortar. This wouldn't be the first time the bastard got a lucky shot in on us with that thing, but it will be the last, I can guarantee that. Unfortunately though, as the smoke cleared and the dust settled, we realized that a huge chunk of our dock had been exposed and destroyed, and underneath the rubble was Baker's corpse. It would appear that the old hunter has claimed one final victory before his enslavement. Well, we couldn't just leave her there. We picked up her body and we took her onto our flagship. The only burial and funeral fit for a pirate, especially one of her caliber, is one that is at sea. Now, with our friend buried, we would return back home, docking our flagship and returning to life without her, unfortunately. The show must go on, and we have a lot of work to do back home, in particular a lot of cleanup, such as slaughtering all of these German shepherds. I know, it seems a bit disgusting and unethical and also immoral, but I hate to let this dog meat go to waste. No, it's not for us, you silly little goobers. We're going to feed it to our alligators. Once they're healed up, of course. Throughout the next couple of days, we would have to repair many sections of the city from the battle, as well as clean up as previously mentioned. In particular, the most damage that we could find was, of course, to the large hole in our dock, which we got patched up rather quickly. The damage to Mrs. right eye, however, could not be repaired, so instead of trying to pick out all of the monocle glass that was stuck in there, we decided to just kind of hide it with an eye patch. I feel that this is a much more fitting look for her anyhow. The one-eyed, imped baddie. Take that how you will. It was during this time of Reconstruction that we'd finally beaten the old man into submission, and I do mean that quite literally. Now, we're not necessarily the ones to keep slaves, but a king does need somewhere he can stay, and just in case perhaps we end up taking prisoners some high-ranking British officials, maybe a magistrate, a governor, or someone of that sort, we don't want to keep them in our prison and not let them walk around and basically just have them rotting, so we'll end up having to enslave them as well. All that to say, we ended up building something of a slave residential area. We're not monsters, for God's sake, and even though they wouldn't give us the same courtesy, we are willing to do it for them, even if, old man, you really don't deserve this and we would rather just kill you. Something I haven't mentioned, but I should probably mention, is the fact that we're using up a lot of our wood right now to make some passive coolers in all of our buildings. This global warming is really burning us up, so as we continue getting more traders, we're going to have to try to buy more wood from them. Speaking of, we're going to be renaming our secondary cog ship to the Mule, the perfect vessel for some trading. This name comes from our good friend Data Big Viking, as the mule is simple, strong, and of course the cog can carry a lot of weight, as can a mule, so thank you, my friend. I always like to keep you fine folks in the loop with what we're trading. In this little trade trip, we are going to be selling plenty of tobacco leaves, as well as plenty of dyes, and even a lot of cloth and different types of leathers as well. All this and more headed straight to our tribal trading partners to the east. While Martin and Hughes are on their way over there back home, we are really ramping up production on our stone cutting in the city. We have a major construction project to work on this episode, and to try to complete this episode, God willing. We are going to be fortifying this city, and I really mean fortifying. We are building some of the largest slate and granite walls that this world has to offer, offering nothing less than our complete and utter ample protection around every single corner. But as mentioned, this project is massive and is going to take quite a while. So, So let's check back in on Martin and Hughes, who have just finished up their trading. While visiting the little tribal town, they were actually told of a nearby hidden item stash full of riches and goodies, or so the rumors say. It's just north of the city on the shoreline, so they started headed up there. As they began to sink anchor and stop for a bit, it would seem that this place was completely barren with not a soul in sight. But keep your wits about you, young lad, as anyone could pop out from anywhere. Martin, with his keen and experienced eyes, would end up spotting the item stash, or what appeared to be the item stash, in the distance. Again, it doesn't seem that there's anyone here, but that hasn't been the case for very long. Our item hiding friend has either left the area or they're inside. Well, I suppose it's time that we find out, eh? Martin taking the lead, cracking the doors wide open, and inside stood a gigantic red figure wearing plasteel plate armor. Holy shit. This impede is a behemoth. For God's sake, what have they been feeding him? It looks like he's protecting books. These must be some pretty important texts to have someone of his stature guarding them. Martin firing at the large beast, trying to get him to come outside, during which time he ended up lighting the books on fire. But there was no time to extinguish our new prize, as its guardian was clumsily running straight out of the doors wielding his axes. Thankfully, Hughes, being as young and nimble as he is, he managed to avoid a quick beheading. Most bullets simply bounced right off of his advanced plate armor, but thankfully, with one mortar shell, this fight was over. Ooh, you almost gave us a run for our money there, big fella. I would say that I'm shocked that you're still alive after that, but I'd be lying. Thankfully, we were both quick enough to go about extinguishing the flames on the books, and we managed to save them. Not only that, but we would end up tending to the wounds of the large impede in the plate mail, as we really hate to let raw talent go to waste like this. Besides, perhaps he'll be able to help us decipher these texts in the ancient impede tongue. Either way, those efforts can only begin once we finally get back home, which we would begin making the very long journey back to. I'm sure Miz and the others are quite worried about us anyhow, since this was supposed to be a simple trade mission. I'm sure she'll understand though, especially once we show her all the silver that we made and also all the loot and plunder that we took, as well as a new barbarian to serve us. We would finally dock back at the, dock, and then we would regroup with everyone else, quickly taking our new impede prisoner to the prison for his recruitment. Now that we're back home and we've gotten all of our winnings and also our trading money in order, it's time for us to start working outside of our brand new walls that we're building. As you well know, and as you can well see, of course, this island is nothing but damn sand, except for a few tiny little spots where we've been growing plenty of food and, of course, cash crops. Unfortunately, one such plot of land is outside of our walls, and it's realistically not going to be that easy to build around the soft sand, and also not as symmetrical to do so, and to bring it on the inside. So we are actually going to be building something of a smaller fortification and or fencing around it, I suppose you could say, where we are actually going to be growing all these crops. Now, obviously, I do realize that the fencing offers little to no fortification, so realistically, we don't really have any protection out here, and that is exactly why we're going to build a little small fortified area near the doors of the walls. That way, if we need to, we can make a quick escape, but we can also quickly come out at any point to defend it. And this is going to allow us to protect our farms. It was also during this time that one of the French lords in the area offered to let us pet sit his pet goat, which is apparently his beloved pet goat, a pride and joy of his, for a certain amount of time, and in exchange, he would give us a decent soldier. Well, we like to get as many soldiers for our pirating operation here and privateering duties as possible, so of course we accepted. We chucked the little fella straight into the alligator pen. Not to worry, they're highly trained, and I'm sure they'll take good care of him. Let's just make sure we fill up their food bowl. Continuing on with our defenses, now that a bare skeleton of our walls is completely done, we need to move our entrance defenses on the northern side. So we ended up building plenty of sand sandbags, a proper path, our cannons once more, and even some slate embrasures, which are actually going to be very useful in tandem with the sandbags at keeping us under the proper amount of cover so we don't lose our heads. A few things that I forgot to mention that I guess is a good time to mention it right now. The fact that we are currently growing some fiber corn as well, which is something that we very much need, as we can't just keep buying all of our wood or going out and cutting down entire forest at a time like that, as it's going to keep our pirates separated for too long. We need wood for many projects such as this. Building extensions of our walls into the ocean just off the shoreline. The reason that we're doing this is so that it's not so easy for any attackers to just simply walk around wading through the waters around our walls, of course. And of course we also need to use the wood to keep things fueled, like our lanterns and also our passive coolers. With this, our defenses are complete finally, or at least for the time being. We still have a lot of progress to make on our city before it is a real staging ground for a ground invasion of the nearby British settlement, and before it becomes the utopian hub of pirating, privateering activities in these lands, though we are pretty darn close, I'd say. As we were working on all these defenses, we had finally recruited the Plasteel Knight Impid into our ranks. The only issue is he only speaks the ancient Impid tongue and doesn't understand a lick of English, so we're having to communicate with him through hand signals. We'll get around to teaching him though. We would, however, send him into the armory to go about equipping his axes once more, as well as giving him a blunderbuss and a pistol. Normally, thus far at least, anytime we've recruited someone, we've made them wear some proper pirating attire. But for the Plasteel Impid Knight, he's almost like something out of a damn fairy tale, so I've decided that we're gonna let him keep it. Now then, we've done plenty of recruiting and enslaving and trading this episode, but I grow hungry for some proper plundering, don't you? And that's exactly why we would take a few days to load up the fleet and begin sailing to the north to a nearby British town. That's right, our very first actual sacking of a town, not an outpost, a town. It may not sound all that cool, but this is going to be a massive achievement. We have yet to take on the British in full force, or at least in terms of an actual settlement of theirs. We've heard that this one in particular has been serving as something of a resource and trade depot for them in these lands, so no doubt there's plenty of riches as well. Not to worry though, thankfully now we have so many pirating privateers in our ranks and in our crew that we wouldn't leave our city unmanned. We could actually leave Forak, Maker, as well as Hazel, I believe it was, back behind to take care of the city while the fleet was sailing. Quite glad we did as well, because we ended up having a tribal war merchant joining us down here, where we would do some trading, and we would also end up purchasing some new animals from them. We ended up trading them off a few rifles and muskets for 2 large grizzly bears, a male and female that we can breed. The perfect animals for war and for helping us out with that land invasion that we've been discussing. I wish I could tell you that this is my genius idea, but it actually comes from our good friend Mr. Cuddles, who likes to snuggle. An absolutely splendid plan, my friend. But the fleet was finally sailing around the Ariritus Horn, and within a few short hours they were just about to arrive at this British trading depot. Speaking of which, it would indeed appear that we've made it. There's just one itty-bitty teeny-tiny issue. The town is pretty far away from the coast, and that also means, of course, as you well know, we can't just start bombarding it. They're pretty smart about where they build these damn things, I'll tell you. We'll need to try our old tried and true method of hopping off the boats and enticing them, you could say, to come out near the ocean where we could fire at them. The only issue with that is that this place was absolutely absolutely crawling with soldiers, and not only that, they also appear to have a prize general within their midst, so their tactics will no doubt be more advanced than what we've seen thus far. Little do they know that we've brought along with us an enslaved bounty hunter who we don't care if he lives or dies, and we plan on using him as bait. As mentioned before, they were quite more intelligent than the previous attacks that we've seen from them, only sending out a handful of soldiers to deal with us. Our enslaved bounty hunter would hit the ground, but we had managed to catch them on fire, causing more of them to come out to attack us. Oh, you poor dumb animals, we have you right where we want you. Unleashing an absolutely catastrophic amount of barrages from our ship's cannons, easily destroying the attacking force. I was almost impressed with how quickly these cowards started running away after seeing some of their friends turned into strawberry jam on the ground. It's actually kind of pathetic, but the less cannonballs we have to fire to shred them in half, the more steel that we save, so whatever. One such coward just so happened to be their prize general. So much for those advanced British strategies, huh? I suppose you better stick to naval tactics, pal. Look, it's the old man. I suppose you didn't die after all, huh, King, you old salty, scurvy bastard? Come on, little fella, let's get you patched up. You've got a lot more work to do. Our pirates began investigating this little trading depot, looking all around for any and all loot and plunder they could carry. This indeed was not any type of military installation, but they had quite a few weapons in storage that would bring us a vast fortune, as well as just over 1,200 gold. Oh my lord, sweet heavens, we are rolling in the dough now, my friends. Well, if they didn't care about us all that much before, which I suppose they did, I think there's a rather large bounty out on all of our heads by this point, but I'm sure that they definitely have taken notice of us now, and we are well ready for anything that they could throw our way now that we have a properly defended city. If they wanted to stomp out our flames, they're far too late. They should have come well before we've built up our fortifications. Any attack against us now, even from the sea, seems like it would be completely futile. Not only would we end up returning home with all the gold, weapons, and all the other plunder that we had managed to take from their little town, but we would also take a couple of their soldiers back as well. Here's hoping they make for some decent pirates. Speaking of the riches that we've obtained though, we have a lot of jade, gold, and silver and gold in particular, in storage, but I don't like just having it right out here in our little warehouse, and so I wanted to commission a proper bank of sorts that be built. That way we can actually have a more secure and protected place to store all of it. Right in the middle of our construction of this new building though, we received notification that the French as well as the Impid tribes people had arrived in the area, and they planned on having a little bit of a skirmish. Now you know just as well as I know that the French are our major ally, if not our one true ally and benefactor, so of course we had to give them a little bit of a helping hand. As the sun began to set and the Impid tribes people were planning out their attack, we came near where some meteorites had landed and began staging an ambush. When they went to attack the French, we would pop out from behind these massive boulders, firing at them, weakening their numbers and picking some of them off. Now, with many of their warriors already killed, they would be easy pickings for the French, who would end up finishing them off, and quite literally finishing off those who were wounded, as well as taking what gear they could from them before leaving, increasing our relations with them even more so. After making our friends even more friendly with us, we would finally finish up that little bank that we were working on, and though we do not currently have the entire place chock full of these large shelves like we're eventually going to, as of right now, I think that this is going to be plenty for our current fortune. And while we're making improvements around the city, I also wanted to make an improvement to Widow's Revenge, the home and main capital building, I suppose we could call it, of Ms. herself, giving her her own personal library, especially for all these new ancient texts that we've acquired. It felt like a fitting place to keep it. That way, she, a lover of literature, could go in and try to begin deciphering them, as well as reading many a novel and fictional tale. tale. Come on, Hughes, get in here, son. It's time for your reading lessons. Just because you're a pirate, it doesn't mean you can't learn how to read. No adopted son of mine is going to be an illiterate buffoon. Speaking of illiterate buffoons, our other pirates needed something to keep them occupied and to keep their recreation up. So, with all of our cloth that we've been growing, we ended up building them a poker table, a place to keep them entertained and also for them to lose all their money. Now then, with all that taken care of, I think it's time that we give our animals some names, starting with our alligators, our first of which is going to be named Tic Tac, and the other is going to be named Hook. Some wonderful name suggestions from our good friend Sir Ignacio, a regular with the names and suggestions. Thank you once again, sir. These names are of course references to the famed movie and tale Peter Pan. Now, you also said that I should give a hook hand to our friend the pirate Aloe, but unfortunately I may not have specified, but Aloe's hand isn't just the issue, it's actually his whole damn arm, as it's basically a nub at the shoulder. Sorry. Moving right along though, we have a name for our coyote, with that being Yote, a simple and cool name by our good friend SoulClick452, so thank you ever so much as well. I like to think that Hughes here probably named the coyote that as well. Since he is illiterate, maybe he would say Yote for coyote while reading, something along those lines, but that's just my own little fan fiction. Now then, my friends, before I bid you farewell, we are going to be once again expanding the city with a new residential area, just kind of adding on to the previous one, but this time around our bank. Nothing too significant here, but the reason I guess I'm building these around the bank, other than the fact that we already have some homes around it, is just simply that way if someone sneaks in, say, and they're trying to rob it, we'll already have plenty of soldiers around here to stop that person. And with that, the goat named Zero of the French Lord is finally ready to go back home, and after exchanging the goat out, we would get Yumi in. A very interesting looking person. I think we're going to have to start purchasing the ancient drug known as Go Juice. After taking a look at Yumi's stats, I think that the French are playing a prank on us. What kind of freak did they send us? She can't do a damn thing. Well, if you can't fight like a pirate, at the very least you could attempt to look the part. Your hair is all shaggy, so you need a quick trim, and you could go ahead and dye it to a less revealing color. That way you're not so easily seen during battles or during invasions. Alright, somebody get this useless turd a mop so she can swab the poop deck of the Black Widow, I guess. At least she and the other pirates we've recently recruited who have been staying in the barracks will have a nice little cozy slate home to live in. But with that, my friends, this episode, just as all others before it, must come to a winding end. We have made a lot of progress once more, and I am quite proud of the expansions in our city, but not only that, the expansions with our attacks against the British. But thank you all once again for watching. I'll see you later. Goodbye. Well, welcome back, you scurvy, salty sons of, pirates. Ever so glad you could join me here once again today for more of our oceanic adventures. As you well know, we've been turning this little podunk pirate town into a proper city, a global hub for all things privateering and pirating. And so, that's what we're going to begin doing today again. Although, I must say that our first little construction project here has less to do with us becoming a proper city, although we are expanding, of course, with this building, and more to do with us prepping for a land invasion against our enemies, the Brits. This, my friends, is going to be something of a stable area, I guess you could say, for our bears. A proper place for us to house, facilitate, and also train our bears. One might even call it a bear training facility. As a matter of fact, I would call it that. And at the center of preparing these bears for battle and training them up however we see fit is going to be our bounty hunter slave king. Now I hear you, why would we choose our bounty hunter slave for such an important job? Well, these quote-unquote tamed bears are still pretty darn wild, so if anybody needs to get eaten by them, we thought he the best option. And he also has a pretty decent animal skill, so it shouldn't take him very long at all to get get them trained up with a little help from some delicious kibble, of course. But as King is helping prepare our army of war bears, we have even more construction to do, this time around the horn of our little isle. This little horn also just so happens to be right next to our main dock where we keep all of our ships. Now, of course, it is going to be pretty well protected by our ships, but if, say, for example, our fleet is not within the area or nearby, we're going to need some proper defenses, and thus why we would end up building a defensive fortification, you could call it, coming equipped with a singular cannon to fire at any enemy ships, of course, and also some sleeping bags and other basic amenities for someone who may have guard duty that night. A massive thanks to our friends Gravity Gamer and Wodon85 for this wonderful suggestion of a fortification to protect our shoreline. When fighting enemies like the British with the most powerful navy in history on the planet, it's going to come in handy, no doubt, if and when they decide to try to take their naval forces into this area. Now then, since our trading industry is growing exponentially, I thought over by our trading dock, since we do have a lot of people docking and doing, well, trading and bartering, as mentioned several times there, a little bit too repetitively, I'd say, we are also going to be building something of an inn. That way merchants can stay here and they can pay us a very small fee to do so. That way, since we already have them coming in, we're at least making a little bit of money off of them. You'll notice in the back as well, we have a smaller place for some of their deckhands and their crew and people like that who don't exactly need the best rooms. People are always dying to do business with us, but if we're forcing these merchants to sleep out in a tent on a rainy night when there could be some high waters or even tsunamis or whatever, they might not be too interested in doing their selling here. And I feel that this is a great addition to essentially what is our trading district of the city at this point. By this point as well, some time had passed obviously, and we had finally recruited Layla and Nestor, the two British soldiers, into our ranks. Welcome aboard, folks. We'll need to throw together some proper black attire for them, but for now we're gonna need to send them into the armory to go ahead and equip some rifles and swords. Funny enough though, Nestor here is somebody that we've seen before, or at least that Ms. and also King has seen before, that is. Some of you may remember, but Nestor was actually one of the founding members along with King for his bounty hunting service. Now, as to why Nestor ended up becoming a soldier in the British Army, we're not exactly sure. But if I had to guess, I would say that there was some type of falling out between the two of them, and Nestor felt that his services were better elsewhere. He and King are the reason that Ms. is missing her legs and has peg legs, but I suppose since Nestor's joined us, we'll let it slide. But we'll be keeping a close eye on you. In the meantime though, by this point we have grown quite a few cotton plants, and it's time for us to harvest them and get plenty of cloth. Since the French are our largest benefactor, I feel like it's time that we start kind of adjusting to their needs specifically, and in more particular terms, their military needs specifically. So that's exactly why we're going to be creating some French uniforms out of all of this cloth. That way we can sell it to them and make quite a profit. Unlike our onions and tobacco leaves and a few other things that we just sell straight after growing it in the ground, these actually require quite a bit of time to produce, though they are well worth it. As you can see, once we finally had one of our French trade caravans arriving on our island, we would end up trading some of these uniforms, not even all the ones that we made, in exchange for not only silver, but also some good medicine and plenty of different types of alcohols to wet our whistles with. Easy there, Hughes. I know you're almost 17 now, but it's best that you just sit back and watch Mommy polish off this vodka. It'll put you on your arse pretty quick. Looks like our little merchant inn is getting some pretty good use as well, and we're also turning a little profit from it. Not that that really matters, of course, but there's no doubt there'll still be be enjoying their stay a lot more. Now then, with our land invasion coming up, I thought it might be pretty useful if we had some of our own weapon technology. So we're going to begin researching some SteamWorld melee, which will unlock quite a few different types of swords and other weapons for us to smith. Lickety-split, Maker would get right to work on it, and in the meantime, while he's researching, we would start building ourselves yet another little defensive tower over by the harbor. Because, well, naturally, the only thing that's better than one cannon tower to defend our little dock here is two cannon towers to defend our little dock here, so, that's what we did. By the time we'd finished up with that, we had also finished our research into SteamWorld melee. It didn't take very long at all for Maker to wrap his brain around how to smith a few swords, as I'm sure you could imagine, and with some plastil lying around in our warehouse, as well as this brand new knowledge in hand, Maker would begin smithing the first of what we hope to be many a saber. Being made of plastil, this is going to be a very durable sword that will have a very sharp edge, I might add. Of course, we don't plan on giving all of our pirates a saber made of plastil. That wouldn't be very practical. This one in particular will be for Ms. herself. Such a beautiful and elegant weapon with a Commodore to match as its owner. Now that that's taken care of, we're also going to commission a brand new trading vessel to be built. A much larger trading vessel, I might add. This is going to be our very first galleon ship. And as you can see, compared to our cog, she is a great big bruiser of a ship. Not only in size, I might add, but also in cargo, as the galleon can actually carry up to 2,000 kilograms compared to the 500 kilograms of the mule, the cog ship that we currently have, which is about a 4 times difference. And at the helm of this bad boy is going to be Hughes. We are going to be letting Martin go with him, of course, on a trade mission. As per the usual, these two are growing quite fond of each other on these little trips, but Hughes this time around is going to genuinely be at the helm, and if he does well on this trade mission, Ms. might just give her little adopted boy here a ship of his own. We're going to be taking off quite a few French uniforms to a nearby French village, as well as taking the rest of our cloth to our nearby tribal allies to do some trading with them, as well as staying in everyone's good graces, yada yada yada, making some money, you know how it is. As the two of them were setting sail on the new ship, meanwhile back home everything was hunky-dory. Until it wasn't. We were about to be fighting the largest British raid that we had ever seen. Now, if this isn't a sure sign that we need to get rid of that damn outpost as soon as possible, I'm not sure what is. You may notice that not all of these soldiers are your typical standard line units. Some of these soldiers have some type of hand cannon, no doubt very similar to a hand mortar, but firing much larger and more explosive shells, no doubt. Without a shred of hesitation, we would rush to defend our city. And so came the massive onslaught of enemies like a charging bull. We had primed our cannons and were firing at them as they were coming in, trying to stop them, or at least as many as humanly possible, before they got to us. But eventually, the overwhelming odds would make their way towards us, and we would have to stand our ground here and now. Even if we wanted to, which we didn't, there would be no surrender nor backing down. The Brits were out for blood, but as were we. And I'm afraid to say, but there would be gallons upon gallons of blood spilt here today. But this was not the time to mourn our plasteel night, for the Brits were still breaking our lines and coming right into the city itself. Though their feet would shift in the sands, and slowly but surely they were being pushed back, our pirates would continue standing their ground against our enemies. And with much more time, violence, and bloodshed, we would eventually begin making the Brits flee the city itself. We would continue trying to kill as many as possible as they were fleeing, that way we wouldn't have to deal with them once we invade their outpost later on. But a lot of them ended up getting away, I'm afraid. That's an issue for the future, though. For now, we have other priorities at the moment, such as making sure that everyone doesn't bleed out, including the Commodore, as well as ensuring that our sacred city walls do not burn to the ground, along with what's left of our defenses at the entrance here. Once the flames were extinguished with a little bit of help from Mother Nature herself, we had also noticed that we had lost Aloe during the battle. A piercing shot through his side that appeared to hit both of his lungs. Oh, Aloe, you poor big ginger lug, a loyal trooper until the very end. We had also ended up taking prisoner many of the soldiers of our enemies, of course, so many in fact that our teeny tiny prison was overwhelmed and we had to start making some room on the floor in our entranceway for a couple more of them. They had taken 2 of our privateers. The least that we could do is take many, and I do mean many, of them straight to hell, but also take about 4 or 6 or so of their own and convert them into more privateers. Once we had tended to all of our wounds and we could ensure that no one was going to bleed to death anymore, and once we finally got the entranceway here cleaned up, it was time for us to start repairing and reconstructing. With all of this completed though, there was but one thing left for us to do. Our 2 poor pirates, valiant warriors, deserve a proper burial at sea. Some odd hours later, and Martin and Hughes had finally arrived at the tribal settlement to trade off what remained in our cargo, which was basically just our cloth. But interestingly enough, the tribespeople actually had a few people here that we could purchase out of slavery, essentially buying them their freedom, if they were willing to join our privateering efforts. As you could imagine, the more the merrier. We quickly forked over the silver and started sailing back home, which this time around wouldn't take us near as long since we have an empty cargo hold except for our new privateers and a ton of silver. We've had a rough run these last few days, but something tells me this silver might begin to lift everyone's spirits just a little. Well then, I suppose our next step is going to be arming and training these yellow bellies here for some proper combat with the British. And boy, do we look forward to that. Now that everyone's back home, we should have just enough manpower for some constructing. It's time for us to fix that little overcrowding issue that we're having in our other prison by building a smaller one just above our little slave residential district that we built. This will be helping us out in many ways, and one such way is getting them recruited faster. Now that they're not shoulder to shoulder crammed in the same little rooms, sorta, kinda, they should want to join us a good bit more. Since we've started losing many of our pirates during these battles, it feels like that we should have some type of celebration for them, or even some type of day of remembrance for them. So we're actually going to be creating a holiday known as a Day of Memoriam starting today, April May the 2nd. That way we could go ahead and immediately celebrate and honor the sacrifices that our brave pirating privateers have made for us. For they would not want us to be sad with our heads in our hands, crying many tears. They would want us up and dancing and drinking and gambling the night away. And hey, we would even give our alligators a little treat. Aw, you like that, buddy? I bet it's soft and tasty, huh? Nice and tender. Now then, moving on once more to some city building. In the northeastern section of the city above our residential district, we are going to be building ourselves a makeshift hospital, I suppose is what you could call it. A ye olde pirate hospital, if nothing else. As you can see, we have 4 rooms with 3 beds each, and also just a small end table with a lantern on it. That way any tending we do is well lit, and that way we can have the best quality outcome for said tending, and just this way we don't have overcrowding in everyone's homes, and we're not getting blood everywhere, and yada yada yada. However, on the left side of the building you may notice a small little little workshop, which is kind of strange at first glance, I suppose, but this is actually going to be a prosthetic workshop where we'll be making many a thing like artificial hands and hook hands and arms and legs and so on and so forth, as well as eye patches. Given our occupation, this is something that's much needed, as demonstrated here by our friend Rock, who recently lost her eye in the last battle. Hang in there, old girl, we'll get a patch for that scarred up eye soon enough. Now then, as you can see, we also have our first little baby grizzly bear. Aw, isn't it cute? And deadly. But that does remind me that we need some names for these bears. Starting off, we're going to be naming our male grizzly bear Papa Bear and our female, yes, you guessed it, Mama Bear. Now, at the time of these names being suggested, we didn't have a baby bear yet, but baby bear seems pretty fitting to me. Great name suggested by our great friend Lockwone01, and I also agree with you about getting some other races, and that's why I think currently we mostly have humans and impids, but we recently purchased somebody's freedom who happens to be a Neanderthal. I'm trying here, you know, I'm trying to branch out a little bit as much as I can. And I also think that it's a bit hilarious that Yumi ended up being a pacifist, a little bit of a letdown there. Now then, we've been expanding our bear army and expanding our city, but something we haven't expanded in quite a while is our fleet of caravel. And that's exactly why we're adding this brown beauty into our fleet. One ship larger, slowly but surely, we will be conquering these seas. As for the name of this big old vessel, we're going to be naming her the Green Ogre. And we'll also be giving her a pretty little paint job to match. And this suggestion comes from our friend Frog Mood, who suggested not only the ship's paint job, but also the name, so thank you ever so much as well. If you guys have any ship name suggestions, remember to leave them in the comment section down below. Much appreciated. But who's going to be at the helm of this brand new vessel, you might ask? Well, if it isn't the young lad Hughes. If you remember earlier on, I said if he'd done real well with that trade mission he and Martin went on before, he might just get a vessel of his own from Mama here. No thanks necessary, son. I've actually already thought of a way that you could repay me. You can take this ship and maybe say the Blooming Onion with a small crew and go find us a bit of plunder, okay? And so they would set sail, but of course their journey would take quite a bit of time, so we'll check back in on them in a moment. Back at the city, we're working on a brand new recreational building. Now, of course, we do have our tavern, but we need somewhere where we're not just going to drink, and that's mostly all we're doing. We need somewhere to go out for a night on the town to have some fun, and somewhere that maybe some more of our sober guests might be interested in hanging out while they're in the city. Now, this is somewhere that they could play billiards or darts until their heart's desire all night long, or perhaps even a bit of roulette as Nestor's hitting the keys on the piano, playing a pretty little tune. As we were putting the finishing touches on this new building, though, a new addition to the city, it would seem that Hughes and the others have found something of a tribal impid village. An unusual location for it, as it is in a contested territory, but nonetheless, we decided to approach and see if they might have anything interesting here for us to take. As we sailed our ships up the river at the surprise of many an impid, even from the river we ended up spotting some gold. It would appear that maybe they've been panning this river based on the current equipment that they're using in search of these riches. Now they have our attention. Now, it's not much, of course, panning the river for gold. There's hardly even a few bars here, I would say, but I think Mama will be tickled, huh? Now, the real fun can begin, the absolute and utter bombardment of this pathetic little village. As bad as we hate to have to waste our cannonballs on something so small, it's the best that we could find for the time being. Besides, we need that gold so much more than these filthy impids, do we not? As we continued our bombardment, after a little bit of time, nothing was really left in this village except for a large smoldering pile pile of ash and rubble, and its tribal inhabitants realized that this was their cue to skedaddle. Can't say I blame them, really. And I can tell you, as we set foot on the shoreline in this smoldering, burning city, how nice it was to stretch our legs for a little bit. We've been sailing for far too long. Looks like at the very least we'll have a good little meal for the trip back home, and we ended up getting that gold that we were talking about. Actually ended up being about 100 gold and maybe about 30 silver, I think, so not too shabby for his first little voyage. I'm sure his mama and the rest of the crew are going to be damn proud of him. We might make a captain out of Hughes just yet, though he still has a long road ahead before that's the case. Meanwhile, back home, I have yet to show you. I've been neglecting to show you because I wanted to keep it as a surprise, but we have recruited basically every single one of those British soldiers that we took prisoner about a month or so ago, making our crew about 6 people larger, which is huge growth, the largest growth that I think we've seen yet. It genuinely is a great start, but I feel that we still need quite a few more people before we can truly get a land invasion going against the British outpost on the island. This is something that I hope to achieve next episode, and will most likely be our final episode in this series. Not to worry though, I think we'll be continuing the universe, as long as you guys like it, that is. Now then, something that we haven't done in quite a while is some research, and this time around we are going to be looking into liquor brewing. Every pirate needs some alcohol in their system, unless of course they're sober, which is rarely the case. So we are going to be finishing up this research to give ourselves the ability to make many a different type of liquor. However, even so, there are many different types of stills and many different types of alcohol, so we're going to need a great big place to go about making all these different types. And that is why in the northwestern section of the city we are going to be building a great big distillery. Absolutely massive. As we're working on the new distillery though, our caravan with Hughes and the others had finally returned home with what little riches that they brought back with him, and indeed everyone was very happy and very proud. But not only was there new plunder to ponder about, but also new love. It would seem that Martin has courted Hazel by complimenting her abilities. My oh my, you sly dog, you Martin. Well, we'll need to try to build them their very own little home. I think that they've earned it. They're basically founding members of this pirate crew along with Miz herself, and perhaps if we give them their own home, they'll even have some pirate babies for us, the first. We'll have to wait and see about that though. As you can see though, we have finally finished up our distillery, which has many different types of stills already in it, some of the more simple ones like a gin still, and some of the more complicated ones like a whiskey still. On the outside I also have some spaces so that we can go about growing hops and potatoes and other different types of vegetables that are going to be required to make the mushes and mashes for all these alcohols. But this entire distillery is an idea from our good friend Matthew Grayling. I can't believe I had never even considered making one of these in our pirate city, for God's sake, but I'm glad that you did, Matthew, so thank you for that. I believe that this mod actually has rum in it, and we just need to do a bit more research, so we will get around to specifically making that, and if not, we'll add a mod, of course. But my friends, our city is coming along very nicely, and to be honest with you, it's almost complete. I'm thinking we may expand our growing zones a bit, especially with our growing population, but if you guys have any suggestions as to what you would like to see in the city in terms of our buildings and stuff, feel free to leave that in the comments section down below, and we'll try to get it next episode, which, remember, is most likely going to be our last episode, simply in this pirate series, I suppose. We'll definitely be coming back to this universe, because it does seem like you guys really enjoy it, and hell, I do too. It's really fun. So it won't be the last that we actually see of our city. This is more of just setting us up as a huge faction for this universe, I suppose. But until next time, stay scurvy, baby. Hello, my ruthless, adventurous little pirate compadres, and welcome back. Today, my friends, we are going to be doing two massive things. We are going to be finishing off our pirate city here and becoming an absolute global powerhouse on this side of the main continent, and we are going to be getting rid of the British outpost that has been plaguing the island of Fortifying this entire time and taking it for ourselves and only ourselves. Last episode, we had taken prisoner and recruited many a British soldier who will now be joining us and who have already joined us as pirates. First things first, they need some proper pirating attire. Using all the cloth that we currently have in storage, we are going to be switching from making the French uniforms that we've been selling to them to making some soldier coats for our new little outfit. Once these coats were completed for our new scallywag squad, we would send them into the armory to equip some new pistols, rifles, swords, and even a few grenades here and there. And just like that, voila, a new squad. Now, I'm not the only one, it seems, to think that this group of soldiers who all came from the Brits would still be fit to be somewhat in their own squad. Our friend, Wiener Schnitzel 186, seems to think the same, and has even suggested the name for them, the Turncoats, which I very much like. But we would only be able to bask in the new squad's glory for a little bit of time before a gigantic man-hunting pack of lions entered the area. This isn't surprising, as there's most likely a food scarcity with the global warming that's happening on the planet. Even we ourselves lately have noticed a significant lack in wildlife on the island to feed to our gators and bears. Perhaps worst of all, this was all going on King's 71st birthday. Sorry about that, old boy. Looks like we'll be putting the party on hold for a moment. As quick as a flash, we all would rush to our defenses, ready to take on these purring kitty cats. And as they approach, we would unleash a barrage from our cannons, muskets, pistoles, and anything else we were holding in our hands. Unlike our other enemies, these lions did not fight for riches and gold. They fought for survival and food, meaning they were desperate and even fearless. So fearless, in fact, even after hitting them with several cannonballs, they were still willing to chase us into the city itself to try to eat us. But our strength and resolve has evolved past even Mother Nature's most simple of instincts in these creatures, meaning in fact that we would end up defeating them in the end. Now that's not to say that it was an easy task to do. We damn near lost many of our pirates, and I'm honestly not exactly excited to check the damage on each of them. And in the end, all we really had to show for it was our lives and a great big pile of rotten kitties. But that's better than nothing, I suppose, and I guess we could go ahead and let King have his little birthday soiree. Now, it might not make sense since he's tried to kill Miz in the past, but we want to try to keep morale high around every corner. Although I don't know exactly who is going to be willing to go or even able to go, as most of our privateering pirates are very much injured and bedridden at the moment, including our poor young Hughes with Hazel and Martin, the founding members with Miz herself. Don't worry, young one, Mama's here. You'll feel better soon, I'm sure of it. And in fact, after about a day or two, he was feeling right as rain. Well, except for the fact that his right eye is missing now. Like mother, like son. The boy is definitely a chip off the old block now. We'll get you an eye patch for that, little fella, no worries. He'll really be living up to that Pirate Prince of Fortifying title now, don't you think, Dr. Josiah? Yeah, I think so too. Now then, we are on the track to become a global powerhouse, but of course, to go about doing so and to expand to new horizons outside of our island once we take care of those pesky British, we are going to need a much larger fleet of ships, of course, so we're going to start working on the components like sails and rigging to do so, which will take some time. In the meantime, we're going to be working on that city expansion that we were talking about and filling up the streets and also building the streets within the confines of our big and beautiful walls that we've already built. We're going to be beginning this expansion with two new shops in the western part here, one of which is going to be a tobacco shop where we sell plenty of cigars and cigarettes, the most delicious of which. And we're also going to be selling in the second building here some delicious, tasty gin that will get you drunk off your arse. We already grow plenty of tobacco, and we're having to try to take it out or wait for trade caravans to come here to go about selling it, so it only makes sense that we would kind of up the stakes a bit here and up our production by actually rolling it into cigarettes and cigars. And as for the gin, we built a distillery last episode in the city, so maybe it could become something of a staple for our little city-state nation here. Shops like these are also going to be super useful for folks like Yumi who are incapable of violence, which is very much needed in our day-to-day operations around the city and also our privateering duties. So this will give her something to do when we're fighting and killing and plundering. Now, I was given the idea for some new shops by our good friend Rex705 Gaming when they suggested a marketplace as a new area in the city. So thank you very much for that, and I think that's what we're going to be continuing here in the western side as we continue expanding it. A little bit of time later though, and we had finally crafted up all the components like a mast and sail and rigging and sailing instruments and everything else we needed for our next frigate, and it was time to finish this bad boy up. As for the name of this one, we are going to be going with the Weeping Mary, a very foreboding name if you ask me, and as explained and suggested by our friend Shane Richard 9319, not only is this just a great and kick-ass name, but it is also going to be in honor of all of our fallen pirates. And I think creating a frigate to use against our enemies is a very pirate thing to do to honor our dead. And I just want to say you guys have been absolutely killing it with the ship names lately, so thank you all. Speaking of ships, we are currently loading up all the textiles that we have in storage except some of our cloth to continue making some uniforms to take out on a trade mission. Not only a great trade mission where we'll surely make a lot of money, but this is actually going to be the first trade mission that is spearheaded by Hughes himself. I think that the lad is finally old enough for some real responsibility. Now, this responsibility is mostly just for sailing, as Hughes is going to be at the helm of our trade ship, while Martin and the other privateering pirates are escorting him to his destination on our caravels for protection purposes. We wish them good weather and Godspeed, but as they sail the seas back home, we are once again working on some proper improvements that are going to help our city and our nation grow. For you see, cities and expansions and nations and yada 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 need people, and people need food, and currently it doesn't seem like we have enough fields to feed all of our people, at least not with all the cash crops that we've been growing. So we've claimed up some more farmland to the east of our walls for some new big old fields where we're going to be growing a lot of onions to feed everyone. Especially given the fact that there is currently a lack of wildlife on the isle, I think that this was much needed. A few days later, and we were finally arriving at the tribal settlement to go ahead and unload all of our finest textiles in exchange for plenty of moolah. We would begin heading back home and sailing around our home island as we had hundreds of times by this point, but this time it was different. Two ships would appear on the horizon, frigates. Not French, nor Prussian. It was far too late for us to try to sail away. The only thing we could do now was to prepare our battle stations. Unfortunately, during this battle, the Roaring Onion would be completely destroyed, forcing the Black Widow and our trade ship to leave them behind. there would be no use in trying to salvage it, as the ship had been reduced to nothing but driftwood, completely and utterly decimated. Even worse, we already knew it was time for us to flee, as we had witnessed the crew be killed, and with them would go many of our riches from the trade mission, 2 of our turncoats dead, and much gold and silver lost. Hughes, Martin, and the others would manage to sail away just in time where the frigates would not be able to catch them. Well, I know 2 things for sure. Mother is going to be absolutely livid about this, rightfully so. And 2, it's about damn time we got rid of that British outpost to prevent things like this from happening. We would continue sailing around the island, finally arriving back home sometime later. As we docked our ships, we could see the surprise in everyone's eyes as to why there was only 2 of them left. We would quickly explain the situation to Ms., who was rightfully so livid, as we imagined, and we were all very distraught at the fact that we had been attacked and that we had lost 2 more of our own. Though they were new and we hardly knew them, they were still privateers, damn it. Looks like our ground invasion might be coming much sooner than we had anticipated. We're going to need to prepare much quicker than we thought. First things first, we're going to kick things off with some research into early industrial firearms. Most of the countries and factions on the planet seem to still be using muskets and flintlock and matchlock technology, but there are other technologies on the horizon, such as revolvers and things like that. If we can research these and make our own, this might just give us an edge. We do currently possess many of these different types of weapons already, but some of the more interesting ones, like sniper rifles and also some different types of explosive weapons, could be exactly what we need. Because these new different types of weapons are going to need their very own space and very specific ingredients to go about creating them, we're actually going to be building a gunsmithing production area. Along with our production benches, we also have a small little area for all the resources we need, such as wood, steel, and components, which is the vast majority of resources required. To start us off, we're actually going to be creating our very first sniper rifles. Now, we've never had any of these types of rifles, although we hear they can shoot a very long distance, and that's exactly what we would like. They are very costly in terms of components, as one might imagine, so we'll need to try to acquire quite a bit more of those. But as we begin on producing these new weapons, we are also going to be expanding our docks just a little bit. Now, I know what you're thinking, Rat Knight, those docks are very, very small. What are you going to be putting there, canoes or rafts or something? Well, these are actually not going to be used for any type of anchoring of boats and tying of boats. These are specifically going to be for fishing. You see, my friends, as previously discussed, we are running dangerously low on wildlife in the area for us to hunt, so we're now going to be putting priority on fishing instead. There's plenty more fish in the ocean, and although we already do a little bit of fishing, we're really going to be ramping that up to ensure we can feed everyone some of that precious fishy protein that they're going to need for a fight. A well-fed army is an army that wins. By this point, we had finished up about 4 or so sniper rifles, which cost us all the resources that we had in storage. But you know what, I think that lines up pretty well with how many sharpshooters, you could say, we currently have within our crew, so we'll leave them. Besides, we have a more important type of weapon in mind, called a Ketchum grenade. The only issue is, this little grenade requires chem fuel, something that we don't have any of. But you know who does? One of the tribal settlements off the main continent. As a matter of fact, they have an absolute abundance, as they have one of the largest boomalope farms on the west coast. Given the supply being their supply of the fuel and our demand needing it for our weapons, we would immediately set sail to go out and purchase some and or barter for some. I'm sure they'd be willing to trade some off for some of our fine tobacco leaves, but in the meantime, while we're sailing, we are going to be finishing up our expansion of our new market district. Right now, we're once again going to be adding in 2 brand new shops shops that we're going to be selling some of our fine products. Now, this isn't somewhere we're going to be selling more of our bulk products or our mass of products like our tobacco leaves and cloth and things like that. We want to sell some actual items that are a bit more complex and take time to make and will also fetch us a pretty penny. So we brainstormed a bit, and what would you buy from pirates? What would pirates specialize in? Well, artificial limbs, of course, like peg legs and hook hands and things like that, so we're actually going to be selling some of these artificial limbs and prosthetics in one of these stores, and in the other, as you might imagine, we're going to be selling some sailing equipment, some sailing instruments, some mast and sails for ships, and anything and everything else like reinforced wood that you may need to build your own or to also keep up with your own ships and fleet. Finally, our trade ship would arrive at the tribal settlement, at which point we ended up buying about 500, almost 600 or so of their chem fuel. And since we still had plenty more tobacco to barter with as well as silver to spend, we would also end up purchasing some more components to help us out with creating more weapons. With these resources in hand, it was time for us to start sailing back home. In the meantime, once more, we are once again fixing up the city, and in particular this time we're actually going to be fixing up Mrs.'s main building here, the Widow's Revenge. Every good Commodore's home needs a proper trophy room, wouldn't you say, lads and lasses? A nice place to put some of your personal treasures, to mount some of your legendary hunts, and maybe put a few different things like swords that you found or acquired during your adventures, and possibly even a few British officers' hats for display purposes, of course. Ah, young Hughes, just think someday you'll be able to tell your grandchildren about all this that Mama acquired for us and for our empire. You're welcome. Now that that's done, though, we're also going to start on some research once more. We need to also focus on making money. Once we get rid of this British outpost, we still need to make plenty of silver. And a crop that would be perfect for doing that is going to be Devil Strand. While Maker looks into some old text about this specific and very interesting type of plant and its properties, we are finally finishing once and for all the Merchant District and our western side of the city. As odd as it may sound, this is actually going to be a growing area for psychoid leaves. As you well know, we've used up the vast majority of our fertile land on the eastern side, and there's very little on the western side of the city, so we had to make some of our own with some planter boxes. We're going to grow these leaves, we're going to brew it into tea, and we are going to become a trade capital. I mean, we already are, but not for psychoid yet, so even more so. We'd also finally figured out how to go about growing our very own Devil Strand plants, and we would end up getting rid of a small field of our tobacco, mostly because we already have so much in storage that we still need to offload. And in case it wasn't clear just yet, this is going to be well worth it even if we stop selling tobacco completely, as tobacco leaves sell for $1.10, while Devil Strand sells for $5.50 per piece. And obviously it should also be considered that tobacco can only be rolled into cigarettes and cigars, which do fetch a little bit more money, but Devil Strand can be created into many different types of fabric outfits and other things created from textiles, which will sell for much more. Speaking of making money, our trade ship had finally arrived back home. Yumi and Tilly were the ones that had taken it out this time and setting sail for the trade, and when they arrived, they actually brought some interesting, hairy-looking folk along with him. They had purchased the freedom of 2 Itican mercenaries who had been imprisoned by the tribal government. Welcome aboard, lads. I'm sure 2 folks of your caliber will come in very handy during our attack. Perhaps even more importantly, though, we finally got that chem fuel that they had went out to purchase, the main reason for the trade mission, and we would immediately begin using it to make our Ketchum grenades. Again, though, production is tedious and takes time, so how about we check in on our new snipers? A small trio made up of Farak, Brown, and Anarchist with the new sniper rifles that we had created. These fine pirating privateers have the highest shooting skills among all of our crew members, and all of them led by the great and well-renowned Martin. I couldn't think of a better leader for this little outfit. You know, though, with all the progress that we're making so far and all these preparations preparations that we're making for our land invasion, I almost forgot to mention that our city is essentially complete. All the districts that we've created for trade and production and also just housing, and it is completely filled up to the brim of each wall on each side. I suppose we can always expand those as needed as well. We don't intend on stopping our growth, nor do we intend on stopping our destiny. There are some very, very big things that await us, and this is merely the beginning. Speaking of, we had finally finished up our new grenades, and we are also going to be using them in what I'm going to be calling our Bear Brigade. Mounted atop our furry friendos, and I'm not talking about our new Itacan companions, are some of our privateers wielding the grenades we made and revolvers. All of them led by Hughes. Throughout this series, he has proven himself well worthy of being a leader once Miz is incapable of doing so, or God forbid anything were to happen to her, so it only makes sense that we would at least let him lead his own brigade. But we almost forgot we're so used to attacking people from the sea with our fleet of ships, we never make it to the outpost in time, or maybe not at all with the extreme desert if we don't have some proper land vehicles, so we started making some covered carriages as well as ox carts to pull some of our heavy weaponry. And with that, my friends, it is finally time that we get rid of this outpost once and for all. Off we go. Sometime later, and we would finally arrive. We had imagined what this outpost would look like, but we never thought that it would look this complete. And the place was absolutely crawling with soldiers, maybe even much more than we had anticipated. The entire place appears to be led by a magistrate by the name of Tack. No doubt the source of all of our troubles for quite some time. Well then, come hell or high water, no matter how many soldiers there are, we are going to be destroying this outpost today, or we will die trying. We would immediately begin unloading all of our equipment, like our explosives and our cloth, from our wagons. We began mounting a defensive perimeter, using our cloth to create some sandbags and setting up our cannons, priming them for battle. But we had been traveling for a very long time, so we would take shifts. Some of us would work and set up the equipment for the siege and attack, while others, including even our Commodore herself, would take a little snooze. We need to be well rested for the fight. But once our perimeter was set up, it was time for us to start lining up multiple different sections of the outpost walls with explosives. We were about to infiltrate. Attacking from multiple angles like this should give us the upper hand, no matter how many soldiers there are, as we would all rush back behind our sandbags, mounting our cannons. So begins the battle. First things first, we would cause quite a commotion, blowing up many sections of their walls and infiltrating as mentioned. However, the majority of their forces started coming towards the southern wall where we had detonated the explosives, causing our Bear Brigade to make a retreat, and causing Pezza to be overwhelmed by their forces. The Bear Brigade would end up joining us at our defensive perimeter, firing off many a cannonball, tearing the British linemen limb for limb. Our sharpshooters would end up infiltrating the northernmost part of this little outpost, killing any British they came into contact with, and helping flank them from behind. As the poor magistrate stand in a pile of his men's corpses, we were running them over using Yumi, who seems to have had a change of heart about violence. Our line and our defense was strong, damn near unbreakable. And with the Commodore by our side giving some words of encouragement during the battle, we were untouchable. This fight was an absolute slaughter, a bloodbath. The Brits were easily discombobulated and defeated. with many of these fleeing cowards running for the hills. As the moon was high in the sky, the day was ours, and the battle had been won. We rushed to Pezza and our bear, Mr. Cuddles, to ensure that they didn't bleed to death as the enemies were fleeing. Not all of our privateers were so lucky, though, I'm afraid. Both Ben and Tilly had been shot several times, succumbing to their injuries, I'm afraid. But what have we here? Magistrate tax, still intact? Somewhat, it would seem. It's about time we put you out of your misery, you dumb animal. There, now you don't have to suffer anymore. It's better than what you deserved anyhow. With the rabid dog put down and the outpost completely decimated, we were now free to claim any treasure that was within. And claim it we would, our rightful plunder. We ended up finding a lot of silver and even a lot of gold, as well as a few different things like ambrosia, smoke leaf, and some other things that we could sell, of course. Perhaps most interesting of all, we found a pretty decent sized stockpile of weapons, many explosive crates, as well as some cannons that they were manufacturing. I have a feeling they planned on using these against us. How the tables have turned. Other than the mentioned things here, there wasn't really much for us to take, though we began to think perhaps this outpost could be our reward after all. Now, I mean, yes, okay, it is severely damaged, like on the walls where we blew them all to hell, and sure, a lot of these structures are currently burning down, but it could still be quite useful to us. It's essentially a pre-built town just waiting for the taking. We would be stupid not to claim it. For now, though, we'll need to take whatever loot we can along with riches and our lives and get the hell back home and regroup. We'll send out maybe a small party to claim this outpost in the very near future. Finally, upon our arrival back home, we were all rushing to the hospital to start healing up, but we were also getting our carts and carriages back into the town, unloading all of the things that we had taken. Hauling all this to their rightful places is going to take quite a while, so how about we celebrate first? Perhaps in the tavern with some of these nice foreign types of alcohol that the Brits had within their outpost. Nothing like a fine tequila. Ah, young Hughes, a boy turned man. You know what, son? Go ahead and have yourself a drink. We're proud of you, and you've really earned it. You'll make a damn fine leader someday. Damn fine. Hi there, I just wanted to pop in at the end of the episode here and say thank you. Thank you for watching, thank you for watching the entire series, and thank you for supporting the series. The pirates have been a lot of fun to play as, and just like many of our series recently, we will see them again in the future. I'm kind of starting up a few cinematic universe here within RimWorld. We have our RKRU, which has been going on for a couple of years now, I believe, or maybe even 3 years, something like that. We've also recently started up a medieval overhaul universe, and we now kind of have this Napoleonic universe. Not really sure what to call it yet. Maybe Rat Knight's Napoleonic RimWorld universe? RKR, well, no, it doesn't really work. I don't know. But if you have suggestions on that, I'm always open to those. Yes, indeed, we will be seeing them in the very near future, and of course, this is not a goodbye to the universe and these characters, but simply a see you later. Now, before the series and the episode ends, though, I did want to show off some great art from our good friend on Discord, Kin King, who is always making some wonderful pieces of art in general for all of our series, but in particular here for the Pirate series. Just as I said to Kin King, I will say to you guys, I really love the golden rings around Mrs. Tail and her earrings here. It's just, it's perfect. Chef's kiss, really. So, again, thank you all for watching and supporting the series. I love you guys, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.